CIA administration continues.
The Russian invasion of Ukraine pushes into its second year.
A Wall Street firm denied any connection to Russian organized
President
crime.
Christensen was laid to rest today.
Forces augmented by the private military contracting firm Wagner Group.
This is the Danger Close podcast, Beyond the Books with me, Jack Carr.
Welcome to the Danger Close podcast, an IRONCLAD original presented by Navy Federal Credit Union. My upcoming novel, Only the Dead, hits shelves May 16th as an ebook, audiobook, and in hardcover. It is available for pre-order right now. My guest today, Jeff Gonzales. Jeff is a former Navy SEAL, and we talk about his time in Panama for Operation Just Cause. He is also the owner-operator of Trident Concepts, a firearms industry training company. And now, without further ado, Jeff Gonzales. Well, let's kick it off, man. Thank you for taking the time to do this. I really appreciate it.
Are you kidding? This is going to be awesome. I'm super excited. Thank you for having me on the show.
Of course, man. So I want to kick it off at the beginning because, you get to know people as you're in passing or in same circles and that sort of thing. And that's why I'm super excited to sit down with you because I'm going to learn a lot of stuff about you that I don't know.
Cool.
Yeah. So path to the SEAL teams. When did you first find out about the teams? And what was your path in?
That's a great question. Like probably a lot of kids my age in the time period I was growing up, went to our high school career counselor, did the battery of tests, and every test came back, you should probably do something like in the park service. You should do something outdoors. I'm like, oh, okay. So lawyers out, doctors out. All right, cool. All right.
What were you thinking before that, before you went in there?
I didn't really have any. That's why I went to the career counselor to kind of figure out, okay, what should I do? Where, because you do all those aptitude tests that kind of like tell you what direction might suit you the best. And every one of them was like, yeah, you should just do something outside. And that, wasn't depressing or disappointing because I really didn't know what to expect. But I guess I had these,
were you like, oh, come on, doctor.
Yes.
Like, that's
roll the dice. Exactly.
Where were you growing up? Where is this?
I grew up in just outside of San Antonio in the hill country here in Texas.
Oh, wow.
Beautiful. Yeah. So I had a great childhood, the kind that I wish my kids would have had. Yeah. But the Navy kind of came into I guess they came into the picture right about that time because I was thinking to myself, well, I don't know if I really want to be a park ranger, and I don't know if I really want to do any of these other outdoor-ish type jobs that they had suggested.
Yeah.
And so I started looking at the the special operations side of the house. And, back then there was no internet. I know that sounds weird, but there was no internet. So the only way that you found out about anything was you went to the library, you got books, or you got, pamphlets. When I went to the recruiter, I'm not kidding, there was a single sheet of paper that had Spec War on it. On the front was the SEAL teams. On the back was the diving community. So that was all the information that the recruiters had on the SEAL teams. So I kind of did my own research, and I had a high school buddy that actually on graduation weekend, he disappeared. Nobody knew where he went. I went to his house like maybe the following week, and his parents told me that he had enlisted in the Navy and he was at boot camp. So I was like, whoa, that was really weird. So he kind of disappeared and nobody knew what had happened to him. And I didn't see him for like the entire summer. And that summer, so I played water polo and I swam in high school. And the head coach there thought I would be successful in doing a event called the pentathlon, the modern pentathlon. So he took me down to Fort Sam Houston, which is where the national headquarters is for the pentathlon team, and walked me through the halls there. And it's basically, you know, a military building. And to my pleasant surprise, there were actually 2 team guys that were assigned. I don't know what their duties were that they were performing, but they were there. And I walked into this cubicle room of sorts, and there were these 2 dudes that just were like, oh man, dude, I want to be like those guys.
Yeah.
You know, right off the bat, I was like, you got a little bit of information about them. And after that, it was pretty much a foregone conclusion that that's where I was going to go. I didn't tell my parents that I had enlisted. I went into the delayed entry program. So one dinner moment at the table with everybody, the whole family, I just kind of blurted out, so I'm leaving for the Navy next week. Just thought I'd let you guys know.
Wow.
And so it was a little bit of a surprise to my family. And when I got back, I had to wait until I was done competing. I went to, at the time I was a junior, so I went to junior nationals for the pentathlon and competed there. So that was kind of like my.
Can you explain to people what the modern pentathlon is?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So it's 5 events, which I actually did not know. When my head coach said you should do the pentathlon, I was like, well, I know what a triathlon is, but what the hell's a pentathlon? So it's got 5 events. Swimming and running are obviously, you know, part of it. It had 3 other events that were super cool. One of them was bullseye type shooting, another and riding, and then the last one was fencing. And I fell in love with fencing. I dove in head first and that was, of all the events during that train up, that was one that I truly enjoyed. I thought I was going to do a lot better on the shooting side. I actually sucked. I sucked big time. But the fencing was, oh man, it was just so much fun. It was such a blast. And you know what's so funny? It's so the head coach. So we all had at that. Even if I was a junior, we're still working with the national coaching staff, and we had coaches for everything. And one of the coaches that we had was a fencing coach, and he was a local guy, and he was a father who had a son who, ironically, he and I swam against. We swam in the same events against each other all the time. Every meet, it was he and I duking it out. Like about 5 years, flash forward 5 years. And I see him walking through the team area at Team 4. Yeah, so his name was Leslie. Leslie Bleemaster's father was my fencing coach when I was in the pentathlon. And so like 5 years later, I see him walking through the halls. He's a professor down in San Antonio right now, but just talk about a small world. Yeah.
That is wild. Was it the Diafarer program? Did they have that? What year is this?
Yeah, that was 87. 87 was when I enlisted.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. Yeah. So Diafarer program, for those that are listening, I don't know if it exists. Maybe it exists in some form or another. I don't know. But it kind of gave you the opportunity to try out at boot camp. That was the thing. You sign on for 6 years, and we guarantee, because you'd hear some things coming, through the grapevine, like somebody goes to boot camp and their instructor or whatever, drill instructor, whatever, doesn't let them go to try out for whatever reason. Like he doesn't like SEALs, so I'm not going to let this kid try out. And that was the nightmare. Like all you want is the opportunity, and so you hear that. So this program. 6 years, they guarantee me. That's what I want. So I'm signing there. Then you find out, or at least once I got to boot camp, everybody got a chance to try out. Like anyone, if you sign on for your 3 years, your 4 years,
who wants to come out and try for this? And everybody raises their hand.
Yeah, so, everybody got it. So they just got you for an extra 2 years.
That.
No, you don't know.
Yeah, but you don't know that in the beginning. And that was one of the things too that was so funny, because when I finally went to the recruiter, I told him I wanted 2 things. I wanted to get the Diafarer program, and I wanted my rating. The rating that I wanted was to be an intelligence specialist.
Hey,
and he was like, no, we can't do both. And I'm like, well, I'm not signing anything.
Same thing happened to me. I wanted IS, and they said no, it had to be a corpsman. Because they were looking for corpsmen. And I was 96 for me. That was 96 for me. So 10 years later, they're still looking for corpsmen. And at the time, I'm like, well, I guess so. In my head, I'm like, well, I guess you always need a medic with you. So, okay. Then I switched it in boot camp. Like
No way.
Yeah, I got to boot camp and they're like, who wants to switch their rating? Like some people had ratings, some people didn't. I don't remember.
Yeah.
I can't really remember exactly, but I remember that they said, hey, if you signed up at your recruiter for something and you've kind of changed your mind or rethought, here's your top 3 or something you could write down. So I was like,
wow,
IS. And so I got so I went to intelligence specialist school. Yeah.
That's so funny because he was so adamant that I couldn't do both. I mean, just absolutely was like, and as a kid, I mean, I was 17. Yeah. I technically had to do the delayed entry program because I was 17. And so I'm just like, but I'm like sticking to my guns. I'm like, nope, not doing anything, not signing anything. I will only do this if I get what I want. And I did. I got what I wanted. And so, I went to boot camp, went to A school. As soon as I was done at A school, straight out to California.
It was still like 16 weeks plus time on either side at Dam Neck for the Navy and Marine Corps Intelligence Training Center. Yeah.
Well, I didn't do the full 16 weeks because they had 2 tracks back then. And on the one track was Opintel, which was the short track. And so because I was going to Buds, I was automatically placed in the short track, which was Opintel, which actually worked in my favor because it was operational intelligence. Yeah. It was all the stuff that later in my career would prove to be pretty valuable. As a matter of fact, I'm sure you saw the same thing. It's like, damn, you kind of have an inner working on, especially as the SEAL teams took ownership of creating their own target packages. As that became kind of more of the de facto means of doing business, having that kind of in my head as far as like how the intel world works, big picture, was super, super cool.
Yeah, no, it was definitely the right place for me. They didn't have the 2 tracks though. It was just the full on 16 weeks plus time on either side. So I mopped a lot of halls, the bottom floor in the morning at Nimitzi, which is the Navy and Marine Corps Intelligence Training Center. So all morning I would do the bottom hall, and then I go to lunch, work out, whatever, come back, go upstairs to the upper deck, and then do that, mop that all afternoon, then go work out again, and then dinner, and then do that until my class started up. So I got a lot of mopping time in. I got pretty good with that mop.
I got a fair. I don't think I got nearly as much time on the mop as you did.
Yeah, I think I showed up.
You definitely rated higher than me.
I think I showed up. They had just started a class, so then I had to wait for the next one, I think, or something, or it started a couple weeks earlier, so you had to kind of wait until the next one started up. So I got a lot of mopping in, but I think I did so much reading growing up, and I'd read everything I could find nonfiction on special operations, military history, everything in the thriller space. So I'm reading all the Tom Clancy's and Nelson DeMille's and AJ Quinnell's and J.C. Pollocks and Mark Olden's and David Morrell and all these guys who did research for their novels, but particularly Tom Clancy in this space, because when I went through one, certainly when you went through, they still showed the silhouettes of Russian submarines, Russian bombers, and you had to say which one that was. Dude, so I think I could have tested out like my first week and got just not had to mop at all, but that's not how the military works. So I sat through all those classes and did all that stuff and tested and at the end, and then got to Buds.
Man, it was so funny because I can remember when I went to go see The Hunt for Red October, and like I was blown away. I'm like, oh, this is all classified. I was like so blown away. I was like, my God, there's so much detail. The normal, I guess the average viewer really didn't have a true appreciation for how detailed he got. I mean, he got really detailed as far as like, that state of the Cold War and how things really, really work.
Yeah, it was fantastic. He did his research. He did his research back then.
100%. I mean, he was one of the guys. It's funny because whenever you're posting your kind of like your book club references or recommendations, I'm like, oh God, I remember this. This was one of my favorite series. I'm just thinking back to that. And, I haven't gone back to rereads a lot of those, and I probably should. I've just got such a workload of books that I want to read.
Totally.
Don't go back to the ones that I've already read.
Yep. And sometimes I don't go back to those ones because I have such great memories of reading those and reading them at the time, like reading Hunt for Red October when it came out, reading Patriot Games when it came out, reading Red Storm Rising when it came out, reading Brotherhood of the Rose when it came out, Fraternity of the Stone, League of Night and Fog. And I don't know if I want to go back and revisit those through today's lens. And plus all the, whatever filters I've built up, biases, that sort of a thing. I just might leave them as they are in some of those cases
That's
and just
actually a really good point.
have the memory of the great memory of them.
It left such an impression on
yeah.
me. I would not want that impression to be tainted
Yeah.
or kind of altered. You're right. That's a good point.
So
because
yeah.
so much has changed between then and now, and especially with all the guilty knowledge that we both have on the inner workings. You know, it's like, oh, that's not how that really works. Oh man, now I've got a distaste for this, and it's kind of like, I don't need that. I'm good.
Right.
We'll keep it as is.
Or something that I might not have noticed in, 1988, like when someone says like changing clips or whatever else, or like, I don't know, things like that. Taking off the safety on the Glock, and then it'll be like, and I just don't want it to ruin, my memory.
Moment. Oh, I'm so there with you. Like and thank goodness that the Hollywood has invested so much into trying to be more authentic. I think that has been in the last probably 5 to 10 years. You've really seen the change, and you can tell. I mean, you've been on so many deployments. You watch the same films over and over and over again. And so you just kind of like exactly what's happening and all the other inner workings there. But now it seems like they've really gone to the next level, which is really it's satisfying to me in a sense, because I also. God, it's always in the corner going, oh, that's bullshit. They would never do it like that. Or, oh my God, they would all die. I want to enjoy that. I want to enjoy the movie for what it is, entertainment. And so some would say that I have gotten a little calmer on that front. Yeah.
Life's more enjoyable when you're trying to pick out everything that's wrong. When you kind of like, unless it's super egregious, and I was always pretty good at this, unless it was super egregious, like I would try to enjoy it for what it was, and then look past the smaller things that stand out. But now I see how, especially now that I've been involved with the production of my first novel, I see how easy it is, even when everyone is putting all their effort into making it authentic and look real and honor what people have done downrange and all the rest of it, how easy it is for things to go wrong, because you have 350 people essentially that can mess something up. And then even if you get it right, but then months later it ends up in editing, and there's somebody in there that doesn't know, oh, we shouldn't use this take because of X, Y, or Z, fingers on the trigger, when shouldn't, whatever. So whatever it is, he's like, this one looks better, but the guy sweeps, accidentally, or it looks like on camera that he sweeps his friend, even if he maybe didn't, but it looks that way on camera. But the person editing doesn't know. They're just looking at lighting and all the rest of it, and continuity, and they're like, okay, let's do that. And now all of a sudden you have something in there that they shouldn't have been. So I just see how easy it is to mess those things up, and I'm much more forgiving. And I was forgiving before, but now I'm much more forgiving.
Much more. Yeah. I think I just kind of got a little mellower in my old age.
Oh man. Yeah. No, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. But yeah, I'll reading all those books, and they were an inspiration to me, and it's why that I'm writing today, because I knew I was going into the SEAL teams, and then I knew I would write because I was having such wonderful time in the pages of those books growing up. But
it's so true. Those were my formative years, and it left such a really good impression of me. And I know that obviously it's fiction, but it still set me on a great path. I mean, it was one of the reasons. There was several things. People ask me like, what drove you to the SEAL teams, and usually there's like 3 kind of responses that I kind of hone in on. One is, I wanted to prove to myself that I could be the best of the best. And, when you kind of and everything has changed since then, but back then the SEAL teams were recognized as being the best. And, that's changed a bit, because now everybody's picking up their game and everything's getting much more competitive across that front, which is all good. So I opted to go that route. So that was number one, to prove that I could be the best. And then number two, and this came later in my career, it was after my first tour, my first deployment, which was a combat tour, and we lost guys, that it became really apparent to me that, okay, this is real, and what am I really doing this for? It can't just be for me. It's like, I've proved that already. I've accomplished that task. What's in it now? And to be honest, it was, the guy on the left, the guy on the right, and the mission. That was the other reason why I did it, was because these guys I came to, admire, number one, because my first platoon was stacked with guys that were, veterans and had been around and done a lot of things. So I was very, very fortunate in that sense. So I wanted to be a part of that. I wanted to be a part of that group, and I wanted to, again, to prove that I belonged in that circle, if you will. But and then then all of a sudden the mission starts to creep in. What we're doing overseas when diplomacy fails, when all efforts to try to find a reasonable solution are no longer on the table, and now it's brute force. It's the hammer time. And so that was something. And then the third one is, I fell in love with the lifestyle. I mean, just bringing it every day. You'd go there, what am I gonna work on today? What is the area? And back then, I'm not gonna lie, I didn't always work on where I was weak. I focused mainly what I was good at, and just kept getting better at those.
Yeah.
And it took a while for me to realize, okay, I need to shore up all those loose ends and try to bring my full game, the complete picture, back up on step. So those were like the three reasons that for me, my naval career was so valuable, and so it made such an impact on my life and all the people that you meet, both within the teams and outside the teams. Just the experiences overseas. To think I got paid for all that is just, it's pretty awesome.
Oh yeah. Well, what was that first deployment?
Panama.
Dang, I don't know how I've known you for all these years, and I did not know you were in Panama on that.
Yeah.
Thanks. You were at Patia Airfield?
So my platoon was the platoon that was down there. So this was also kind of a, bit of history. I was in STT and what is now called SQT. And I remember I got called into the ops chief, a guy named Brian Brackett. Great guy.
Yeah.
Such a, Brian?
I don't know him well, but we crossed paths, and I'm trying to remember where we did.
Yes.
But
I love that guy. Man. That dude, he definitely was another mentor for me in my early career. He's like, hey, you're getting pulled out of STT. Those were the first words that he said to me. And I mean, my heart dropped. I thought, what did I screw up? Right. What did I do wrong? Oh my God, this can't be it. And there was, I don't know if that pause was planned or just the way that he decided to deliver the message, but there was a pause that in my head, I went through like a million different scenarios. And then he's finished the statement by saying, you're getting pulled out of STT to go into a platoon early. And I was like, oh, okay. So I'd finished enough of STT that they decided to pull me out and put me in this platoon. And that platoon was gearing up for what would eventually be Operation Just Cause, but it was before, it was in the early stages of the development. And when things started to really heat up, when, I don't know how much you remember about that, but there was another team guy that got rolled up in a roadblock and was taken hostage. And so that was kind of like his
wife, right? Him and his wife were.
Yep. And so that was kind of like, it's like at that point, the proverbial balloon went up. And this was back when we had pagers. This is how old this is. And I remember when the pager goes off, I was like, because we used to use the pager just to link up at bars. That's, you'd send codes through the page, different digits meant different bars. So now I get this one page and it's like, oh shit, this is real. So we got in and we weren't supposed to deploy until the beginning of the next year. So they sent us down a whole month early to start doing all the battlefield prep stuff. And what ended up happening was the mission continued to evolve and change. And, you know how it is on the ground. And this was back before the task unit was a thing. It was literally, this was our AO, this was our baby in a sense. So it was just, team 4. Obviously we had the augmentation from team 2, but we were down on the ground doing all the reconnaissance work. I did so much reconnaissance work. I mean, so many of those high value targets had my eyeballs on them in the beginning, and things just kind of like I didn't understand how big of a picture that was, even though it was technically considered a low intensity conflict.
What were you doing? Because you had no training for that sort of thing yet. Were you like, well, I've seen this on TV, like in cop shows. Like, what am I supposed to? What were you guys doing for close target recce's, or what would you probably didn't even call it that back then?
No. So like I would we did a lot of urban work. So we did a lot of like drive-bys with cameras and just get on the ground and do old school tradecraft. Old school tradecraft. And the one time that I went in, we got inserted on a couple different things, but this one was the one that was a pretty big deal because it was one of the prisons that had some people that we really didn't want to be there. And I was on that for I think almost 5 days. It seemed like longer than that, but I was like in the field. And the fun thing about that was I didn't know, I knew enough to know, like, okay, if I was going to hit this target, what's important? What's valuable to know as an assaulter that I need to share and bring that out. And it turns out that the target package that we created, we handed off to the Army, and it was a ranger regiment that went and took that place down.
Wow.
But I was able to brief those guys on like details that would have never been. I mean, those guys are so talented. I'm pretty sure that they would have been victorious no matter what. But it was still really cool to provide them that kind of information in real time. Literally, they're like getting ready to jump on the trucks to go and insert. It was that close. I got pulled out. They pulled me out early. I was there and we would get like rotate out. And this was back when we did so much stuff old school. I'd rotate out. I'd send the actual film canister back and then reload with new film and go back up. And actually, I'm like old school Canon cameras with like 500 to 1,000 millimeter lenses that we were using back then. And this was actually another cool thing. We had Spectre on target illuminated with their IR light.
Yeah.
So I got some really cool nighttime stuff before night vision with that type of capability was even in the picture, literally, no pun intended there. So
that is crazy. How did they know you weren't going to come back with a bunch of blurred images? I mean, they just like handed you this stuff and you're like how do you know like f-stops and all that? Because that's not SQT type.
No, it's not. I mean, that was also one of the benefits of going to A school as an intelligence specialist. The OpIntel stuff back then it didn't have anything to do with actual producing intelligence. It's just the interpretation of intelligence for strategic and tactical needs. But like I was the new guy. So when I got to the platoon, all the tasks that nobody else wanted to do fell to me.
Yeah.
And one of them was, as an intelligence specialist, I was responsible for doing intel work. And that meant that I had to get really good at taking pictures. And so I did what I could. I went out and I went to a course there at Little Creek, and I don't remember what it was, but it had something to do with intel and nighttime and photographic type stuff. I can't remember what it was called.
So you had something. You didn't just get handed this.
Yeah.
Okay.
I had that under my belt. It was only like about a 3-day type thing. And I mean, I'm not kidding you. I took over the unit like on the naval station there. I took over there because every naval station has like a photo lab of sorts. So basically, I took over that photo lab and was there like nonstop, literally making or processing the film and creating the pictures that we would go and deliver to the units that were going to hit the targets.
That is wild. Are you a Spanish speaker?
Back then I did. I haven't really practiced it a lot, but back then it was. This is a funny story because when you said that you put IS at boot camp,
and I don't know if I really did that, but I only wanted IS. But
I did. Well,
I can't remember if there was anything else. I just knew I wanted IS, so
I remember this. Third phase for me was diving when I went through BUDS, and so we do our dream sheet, and on my dream sheet I put 1, 3, 5, and SDV Team 1. Because I wanted to stay on the West Coast. Back then, I was all about the West Coast vibe.
Yeah. And you're like, if they don't give me those other ones, they'll for sure give me STV. Like no one volunteers for that.
Exactly. That's exactly what I had in my head.
And they looked at your last name and they're like, Team 4.
That's exactly what happened. And I was the only one from my BUDS class. I was the only. There was a corpsman who had gone through. I was in 155. The corpsman came through in 154. There wasn't another new guy until 159. So we were the only two new guys at the team for like almost a year and a half.
Wow.
It was a long time. I don't know why. It was just, I know why. Because Team 8 was standing up. And so all new guys were going to Team 8 at that point. So just about, I would say probably about not a half of the guys in my BUDS class, but I would say probably, I think we had 16 or 17 guys that graduated. And I want to think like 5 or 6 of them all went to Team 8.
Yeah.
And there was a couple corpsmen that went to Team 8 after they got done with their 18 Delta stuff. So a lot of guys went to Team 8. So that's why. But yeah, everybody else was on the West Coast, just us guys. And I was the only one at 4 for the longest time. It was a long time.
Oh.
I mean, most of it I spent downrange, so that was kind of nice.
That's good, because you don't want to be in the team area as a new guy, as the only new guy.
I was miserable during STT. I couldn't wait for STT to start, because at least you're out of the area.
Yeah.
You're not in the team area as the new guy.
Yeah, character building. But I mean, that's wild. That's wild that they yanked you out of SQT, because I remember that story. And I remember, because I was in high school when that happened, and I already know I want to be a SEAL. And so when that happened, I forget exactly how I first heard that SEALs were involved. And I think I heard that some guys got killed on an airfield, and maybe people didn't use the term special operations in the news that much back then. But I think in my head I was like, And then there were some photos of the guys that got killed getting carried off the plane. And that's when I saw the Tridents. And so I knew then that it was that SEALs were involved, and started looking more into it. And I think there were probably a Newsweek article or a Time magazine article or something that would say, what they could piece together anyway from back then. But I was aware of it when it was going down, and I was still in high school, and I knew I was on that path. And at that time, actually, because we had Vietnam. And then we had Desert One with the Delta, and then we had Grenada and Panama. And in my head, as a high school kid, just platoon had been out a few years, like 3 years earlier, and you're kind of like, oh, I'm going to miss it. I'm like, this is it. I'm going to miss it. I'm still a junior or sophomore, whatever I was. Because you think it's going to be the next Vietnam, because that's what you've grown up in the 80s as a kid. Now it sounds weird to say it, but in the 80s, that makes sense. Like, oh, this is the next Vietnam, because you were always seeing Iran-Contra stuff, mid-80s and all that stuff. And you were seeing all that in Central America, and you were hearing some things about South America, and you're like, okay, that's where the next thing's going to be, because your mind is in jungle mode from all the Vietnam movies and books and all the rest of it. But anyway, so anyway, that's why it stands out in my head so much.
Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I mean, to put it in perspective, the only, it was a very unique time, because the only folks that had combat experience were all the Vietnam era frogmen. So, that's who you learn from. And so to be assigned to a team back then, we had our AOs, a team that their AO was the jungle, and then still have access to all these Vietnam era frogmen that fought in the jungle.
Amazing.
That was awesome. I mean, it was like drinking from the fountain of knowledge, if you will. Like so many. I mean, I learned so much. I mean, and even deploying down to Central and South America and working with the teams, the foreign governments that we worked with down there. I mean, those guys were, some of those teams, some of those units were just. I remember there was this one. It was also really cool to kind of grow up in the Navy during the drug wars, and be involved in that. That was really interesting, because it was just scrappy enough that we were doing things, but not scrappy enough that that it garnered a lot of attention.
Right.
It kind of flew under the radar, a lot of the stuff that we did, just because it's not, it wasn't on the front page. After Panama, it wasn't on the front page anymore.
You just reminded me, there was an officer that wrote a book in the 90s, and I can picture the cover, and I had it, but you just reminded me, I haven't seen it in so long, and I never get rid of any books. It must be in a box somewhere, but I'm going to go, if I can't find it, I'm going to order it again. But I think there was some officer from Team 4 that wrote something, in the 90s. It came out in hardcover. My copy was a hardcover.
Oh, wow. Well, I think
didn't sell much. I mean, it wasn't like a bestseller or anything like that.
Oh,
but if you're looking for that sort of a thing.
There was a couple good books. I mean, Tim Basilovac, Bad Bo, wrote a great book. He was the XO there at Team 4 for a while. And that book, I have that book in my collection, because it was just such a good book. Plus, work under his command. He was one of those guys that just, there was nothing you wouldn't do. If he asked you to figure out how to get to the moon, you would figure out a way to get to the moon. That's the kind of leader he was. So, and
he went to work for another agency later, right?
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
That's where we crossed paths. He was awesome. I heard all these things about him. I remember. He was awesome. That's fantastic.
He was legit. He was such a good dude.
But you didn't even have your Trident yet when they pulled you out for that deployment.
No,
then
I did. So like the thing about it was, they wanted me to get the last part of the workup. So what happened was the guy that I replaced burned in on a fast roping operation, shattered his femur. He was out, not going anywhere. And they were doing the workup for the, the operation. So I got maybe, I think it might have been like September or October that I got pulled out. So I SDT was 6 months. I think I got 4.5 months. I basically missed out on, I think, MAROPS, and I can't remember what else it was. It was I got all the what they call the good stuff done. I got the CQB stuff, the land warfare stuff, the diving stuff, the air ops stuff. I got all that stuff out of the way, and it was just the MAROPS, and I can't remember like the big FTX at the very end. I missed out on that.
Yeah.
But it was kind of like a month and a half of a train up before I got thrown. I mean, it could have been a little bit longer. Now I'm thinking, because we were down there in November, and we did like 2 trips beforehand. Because my first trip overseas was actually not to Panama; it was to Honduras.
Wow.
And we went to Honduras and we worked down there. And the entire time we're working down there, things are percolating, they're boiling, and they're slow boiling there in Panama. So we went down to Honduras, and that trip was really cool because that was my first trip overseas, man. It was just like, oh, this is like, you're exposed to, growing up the way I did. I would say I was sheltered in a sense. So seeing abject poverty, seeing oppression, seeing regime control, all this stuff that you only kind of hear about, but maybe don't really understand until you see it firsthand. So that was really an eye-opening experience. And then, like I said, we got our, I think we came back from Honduras, and I'm not entirely sure. We started back then, there was the last 2 phases that you had to do to complete your workup was the inspection and the kind of like the final test.
Yeah. What do they call it back then? They didn't call it an FTX. They called it, it was like certify you for deployment.
Yeah, but it had a different name.
Yeah,
it was an operational ORE and ORI.
That's it. Yeah. It was before. I think after September 11th, those terms just went out the window. I never heard of them.
Went out the window. Yeah,
I never heard about them.
ORE. So we got back. We did our ORI, which basically you pull every piece of gear out, and somebody comes in and checks a box to say, "Yep, you got it." And then the ORE, which is the exercise, we did this really cool thing that just thinking back to stuff that we did back then. I'm like, I'm just laughing. I'm laughing only because, we pulled off some stuff that just cracks me up these days. Like, wow, we were doing stuff which is like with chopsticks, where now guys have like all this fancy cool stuff, and we're just still kind of starting fire with sticks. Right. But it was still cool. And then we deployed, and then we got down there. We knew we were going down. Our deployment date was set to be after the holidays, and then they advanced us to get down there before the holidays. And then I think I got inserted actually. So officially it kicked off on the 20th, and I got inserted on the 19th. So on the 19th, I'm laying up on targets before everything kicks off. So we can, and then of course, then you see when everything does kick off, you can just see all the fireworks going off all over the place.
No way. And for those listening from before, we were talking about not having your Trident yet. Back in the day, you would go through BUDS, then SEAL, and you get your team, and you wait for SEAL STT, SEAL Tactical Training, and now SQT, but within your team, and then you'd go do that, and then you still wouldn't have your Trident. Then you'd go to your platoon, and then your platoon would kind of give you that sign off. And different teams did different things. Some had a test you had to do. Others would just have like 6 months into the workup. If you were performing, you'd get it then, or however they wanted to do it. It's standardized now. Now you show up to your team with your Trident, but back then I liked how it was, and I liked that you had to prove yourself to the guys that you were going to go downrange or go to war with. You had to get the sign off 100%. From them. That was really cool. I thought that was special.
It was awesome because you go once you get through STT. So I had to circle back and go through the Trident review board. And back then you had your PQS manual. So, that was like,
I thought about that in a long time.
I know.
That's awesome. The PQS manual.
And I had everything checked off that I needed to. So I qualified to go in front of the Trident review board. And it's like, it's a day of just, answering questions, demonstrating skill, answering questions, taking tests.
It's no joke.
It was like
M60, M60 probably at the time, assembly, disassembly, mixed parts mixed in with your M4, which they didn't even call an M4 then, I don't think. No, and pistol parts and other parts they threw in there just to screw you up. And then they're all watching. All the Master Chiefs, or maybe a senior chief or two, and I had, all watching.
All the chiefs on my board are no shit legit. Like some of them were plank owners at Dev Group, and some of these guys were just hardcore killers. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm not nervous at all. I remember though, I missed 2 questions, and I'll never forget this one question because it was, how many chem lights do you need to conduct nighttime fast rope operations? And I was like, I had a total brain fart. I couldn't remember, and I just said 2, right? I thought, well, at the top where you grip, and then at the bottom before you fall off, and the correct answer is 3. So those that are getting ready to
one
go,
on you?
No, you had to put one 6 feet from the end of from the bitter end.
You know what? So I remember.
Yeah,
That's
6
funny.
feet from the bitter ends. So end. However long ago that was, that is ingrained in my head. That's amazing. Reason.
I can't remember one question that they asked me. I remember them sitting there, and I remember doing all the M60 assembly, disassembly, M4, SIG, whatever else they had in there. So I remember all that. I remember doing all that and doing fine. But I remember being nervous about it because because those guys are watching you.
Well, they're also I don't know if they did this with you, but
they're asking cyclic rates and this and that as you're doing it. That's right. They're asking all those questions about the weapons.
For me, if I remember correctly, they weren't asking questions about what I was doing.
Other stuff.
Screw
you up.
As I'm assembling, the AR at the time, because I think that's what we called them. We called them cars back then. Yeah. As I'm assembling the car, they're asking me questions about radios. Then I had to put together a radio, and then they're asking me about maximum effective range of the 60. And then, you're doing the medical stuff, and they're asking you about airborne shit. That's, I think, where I got the question wrong about the fast roping. So yeah, they kind of keep you off balance so that they can kind of, and again, one of the things that I've come to appreciate about that entire period of my life is that it truly is a forging process. That's the best way to describe it.
Yeah.
Because you just keep getting beat down, and then honed, beat down, honed. And I think it was, I can't remember who it was, but it was one of the guys in the training department that kind of talked to me about the analogy, the shirt, steel sharpens steel. And, as you use the steel becomes dull. And so you have to constantly be sharpening the steel. And it was that perpetual cycle that became the lifestyle that there were some guys that did it better than others. Some guys were okay, just doing what they had to do. There was others that that's all we did. That's it. Whatever, we get home, there's 3 of us living in a house. We've got targets on the wall, and we're dry fire practicing as we watch the news at night.
Yeah.
So it was just,
those are good days. Those are good, good days, good memories. Do you remember what your first issue blade was, your first knife?
Well, it would have been, yes, I do. I got to bring my dive knife from Bud's.
Yeah, I got mine's right there.
Oh, yeah, right behind me. So lucky. So my dive knife was in my kit bags that went with me to jump school. And one weekend, we went to jump school in January. So funny story. In January, there's everybody's familiar with Martin Luther King, MLK Day. So we are taking a 3-day weekend down in Atlanta, and there was 6 of us in a hotel room. We all just crashed together, and we would go and hit the bars. And, there's the underground bar region there in Atlanta. And I remember we came out from that area into broad daylight. We were there all night long, and there's a crowd of people on the sidewalk, and they're facing the street. And I that's how naive I was. I was like, I didn't even know what day it was. I just knew it was a 3-day weekend. And I remember, I wonder what's going on. And so I kind of poked between a couple people. I didn't even recognize who these people were. I just started kind of pushing through it so I could look. And I remember I looked down the street one way, I don't see anything. And I looked back the other, and I was like, oh, that's weird. What is that? So we happened to walk out into a Ku Klux Klan march in the middle of the day there, and everybody that I was pushing through, they were all African Americans. They're observing the march, if you will, and that was like, it's like I don't know a lot, but I know that we probably shouldn't be here. We should probably unass this area as fast as possible. So that weekend, my vehicle got broken into, and all my stuff from Bud's was stolen.
Oh,
everything.
So
everything
dive knife gone.
Yep.
Oh, that's brutal.
I
know it hurts to this day.
Yeah. Oh, dude.
I left a bunch of stuff in a friend's garage when we moved out here to Park City, Utah, and he got divorced from his wife. My stuff goes to her house. Anyway, ends up I collected stuff all 20 years. I had a museum of everything. Most all of it's gone. I don't even like talk about it. Let's move on.
I know it's hurtful. It's like
it hurts too much. It really does.
We'll change the subject.
It's so painful. I should have just gone out there and gotten it and driven it out here. And it's too painful. But anyway, that's wild. So what did you get issued? Because I remember, I kept my knife from Bud's. I got to Team 5 when I got there, and I think they gave us the Glock knife. Do you remember that thing? It looked like a stiletto. Yeah. So the Glock knife. I need to get another one because it was in one of those bags. Didn't make it.
So I actually, I can recall, back then we were on the cold steel wave.
Nice.
So we had the CRK.
Okay.
Which was or SRT.
SRT.
Yeah, steel reconnaissance, or something. I think it actually, that's what it stood for. And I still have a copy of, like, a unused copy that I was issued somewhere's in my gear bag, because I love that knife. Okay. But actually the blade that I used the most was the kukri from Cold Steel.
Okay.
That was what I used in the jungle
down there. Yeah.
The machetes were nice, but they just didn't have that lopping power that kukri did.
Weight in the head.
Oh, dude, man. Yeah. I use that bad boy a lot. I have one unused version model of that as well. That's
nice
in my gear somewhere. It's just those things were, and I broke a bunch of those knives, just hard use in the jungle. The knife that I carried with me on my H gear, that was like, your last ditch weapon when all things are bad, was a Master Tonto.
Okay.
And that thing
from Cold Steel, the Tonto from Cold Steel in the day.
Yep. Yes. That thing was just a piece of art. I mean, it was, and I love to tell this story. Like my first platoon, we're training up down in Puerto Rico in Piñeros, where we did our jungle warfare back then. And, it was nonstop. You're basically out there for 3-4 weeks in the jungle, living there, just doing all your IADs and immediate action drills. And it was funny because in the morning you'd get together, you'd go to the hooch, we'd do the warning order, get ready for the day, and then we'd head out, and all day long you just patrol, ambush, patrol, ambush, patrol, ambush. And on the way back you do react to contact type stuff. And so we'd been living out there. That's also where I was issued my Trident.
That's cool.
I got my Trident issued technically by the CO before we left for Piñeros. And, you standing in front of the command, everybody's there. We had almost all platoons in at that time. And I mean, you know how it goes when you get issued your bird. It's like, stand fast, stand fast. And so I remember, the CO tells me about face, and I'm presented to the command. And I'll tell you, it is a moment of just extreme pride, because you are now, all the platoons are there. They see you, they recognize you, they welcome you in. And part of that welcoming is the thrashing that comes afterwards, to prove your mettle. And it didn't come. So I was like freaked out. I'm like, oh, wait a minute, they don't like me.
Yeah.
I must, maybe I did something wrong. Maybe I'm not, maybe I don't belong. For like 3 or 4 days before we deployed to, oh no, wait a minute, I'm sorry. It wasn't Piñeros. That's, I got my Trident before we went to Shaw's. We went to Shaw's for our CQB workup. Nice. And that's
Shaw's
when I got it.
Shooting school for those.
Yeah. So, but I got welcome to the platoon in Piñeros. That's where I got my welcoming party.
That's where you got it pounded in.
Yeah. So
and I found like the guys that I thought were going to hit the hardest didn't, and the guys that I was like, hit really hard. Like, I don't know why that stands out in my mind, but that was fun. That was awesome.
Oh yeah,
what a great feeling.
So and I learned a valuable lesson about the jungle that trip, which is number one, if you're issued a gear list, make sure you have everything on the gear list. Don't try to cut corners. And I thought I knew more. I thought I knew better, and I clearly did not. So I didn't take a jungle hammock with me to the jungle. And so I ended up sleeping on the ground.
Ooh.
Yeah. And so, yeah, exactly. So if folks don't know, Pineros is an island that was once part of the British Kingdom, and it was it's rumored that it was a hideaway for the royalty during World War II. There was the bunkers built there, and it was part of that setup. And we took it over, and we created Unit 8 down there in the dry dock area. But Pineros is home to a very aggressive form of rats. These guys are like cannibals. They will eat each other. They'll eat anything. And my platoon, when they welcomed me, it was a funny thing because they took the peanut butter from the MRE and they rubbed it in my hair. And so I'm sleeping on the ground.
Brutal.
So at night, I didn't sleep for like 3 nights. I mean, just because these rats would come up and they'd start nibbling at my hair. So
that's awful.
I got so like, and it was all night long. I just kept fighting them off. Right. And eventually I got kind of like pissed off, and I would sleep on my side, kind of curled in, and I had the old L-frame flashlight with the red lens on it. And
No way.
I had my Tonto in the other hand, and I would you could see their beady little eyes, and they'd slowly kind of work closer and closer and closer. And I just wait for them to get within striking distance, and then I would just start stabbing. And I remember I think the straw that broke the camel's back was one morning I came into the hooch for the warning order, and everybody's sitting around this big tree with a board on it and stuff like that. And I go to the tree and I just like stab the tree, and there's a dead rat carcass around the knife, and I just put it in there, and I go and I sit down on the ammo can. I'm just eating my MRE. I mean, I must have looked like Martin Sheen from Apocalypse Now. I mean, I was just like really kind of like in the zone, if you will. They felt so bad, they actually told me to go back to the unit, take a shower, sleep, and then come back to the back out to the island. So that was my my Master Tonto bloodletting, if you will. That's how I
wild. Yeah, I remember those knives in the Brigade Quartermaster magazine, and what was it, U.S. Cavalry? Those were the two. You could go through those magazines and like, oh man, look at that cold steel Tonto blade. That thing's awesome. There are a few things from those magazines I wish I had been able to afford back then. Back then, like $300. I remember those SOG, the MACV SOG knives that they had back then. They had one that was like SF focused, and then a couple issues later, like maybe a year later, a couple quarters later, there was like a SEAL one. There was a Neptune version or something like that. It's been over 30 plus years since I've thought of this, but but those were like they're like I think $350 or something.
Back then, that's
millions. Might as well have been millions.
Not a lot. I remember it took me like 2 paychecks to save up for that Master Tonto.
Wow.
And then I treated it like with like, like when you get a new pair of shoes and you don't like anybody to step on them. That's how I was with that knife for like, I don't know. I didn't like the sheath that it came with.
Yeah.
Also really great history. Doug McDougall, who was the creator of London Bridge Trading Company. He was a history buff. And so he had a storefront that he had all this military nostalgia in there. And then in the back, he had a sewing shop because he did a lot of restoration for some of the military garb and whatnot. And word got out, and this was before Mike Knoll started Blackhawk. So word got out that he could do that. And I got a lot of my H gear actually sewn by Doug.
Oh, that's cool.
Back in the day. And he made me the sheath that I carried with me, my knife sheath that I carried with me my entire naval career. He made that thing for me. And it was like because that knife was so sharp and such a good knife, I had to have him insert like a metal like sheath inside of the nylon sheath to keep it from cutting through the threads and eventually not being a very valuable knife sheath. So I still have that thing as well.
Oh,
like
that's cool.
That's like the box I have to do that. I haven't done it yet. But if I do it, that's the knife that'll go in the box.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, my London Bridge gear is right behind me. It's up on the safe. I don't know if you can see it back there, but yeah. But it's the newer stuff. It's not, but I had a bunch of old stuff.
Yeah.
I had a bunch of London Bridge stuff from back in the day when I went through SQT and then went out to the East Coast for some things for like a naval intelligence special warfare intel school or something. But man, that's awesome that you have some original London Bridge stuff like that. That is really cool. And what were you doing when you went down? So you go down to Panama.
Yeah.
And they have you doing what we'd call today close target reconnaissance. What were you carrying? Were you like in civvies out there driving? Did you have to set those cars up? And what pistol did you take? Or did you take? What did you take with you?
So I was also very lucky because I went through Buds, and the firearms program that we had at Buds was with the Beretta. And then the SEAL teams were transitioning to the 226. So I remember when I got to the team area and I was getting my original issue from the armory, my C Daddy was with me, and the armor guy goes, you want a Beretta or do you want a SIG? And I was like, well, I don't know what a SIG is. I'll take a Beretta. And Obi goes, no, he'll take the SIG. but I don't know what the SIG is. Yeah. So I carried a SIG, a 226 with me for a lot of things, and I think you'll appreciate this, for a lot of that low vis stuff, I carried a PPK, a Walter PPK.
Nice. They still had some of they had some in at Team 4 probably for that sort of thing, huh?
So this is also kind of like, again, such cool history. Back then, we still had a fairly deep inventory in our armory. It wasn't just M4s and machine guns. We had a lot of stuff. I mean, we had Mac 10s, we had the Hush Puppies, we had some Berettas. The PPK was what I carried a lot because when you're doing that low vis work, I could fit it in a pocket. Yeah. It was easier to carry on my frame than that 226. I mean, right now we really excel in the current training business. We really excel at the concealed carry, the low vis work, because I had to figure out how to work a 226 on my frame downrange. There was no holsters that would accommodate it. Inside the waistband was such a early stages that there was nothing there. So that PPK just was so nice. I could put it in my back pocket. I put it in my front pocket. I carried it more in my back pocket than I carried it in my front pocket. Okay. And I love that thing, man. And we had about a half dozen of them, and some of them were more reliable than others. That was the thing. And it wasn't because of the gun per se, it was the ammo that we had. The PPK is a 380, it's chambered in 380. So there wasn't a lot of 380 in our inventory. So what we had was old. And I literally can remember the only ammo that I could get was like this ball ammo.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say probably ball, yeah.
From like World War II. I mean, it was this like super old stuff. And I got lucky, and we found back then Winchester silver tip. So I got a chance to, but I had like not even a full box of it.
Wow.
And it was in the old orange tray with the white foam in it. It had a white box cover, and I had like one box that had like maybe 32 rounds in it. And I had to guard them with such care, because that was it. Those were the only, because those were hollow point rounds. We knew that those were going to be better. What we knew was they were more reliable than the ball rounds that we had. So I carried a PPK on a lot of things.
That's incredible. And they didn't issue you leather with it, so you're just putting it in the back pocket. There's no, like you said, there's probably the leather being an inside the waistband type of a setup. Probably didn't really. A couple of years down the line, probably for more people.
It took a lot. Yeah, it took a while before concealed carry equipment started to evolve. I mean, I would say probably 10, 15 years after that before it really became so prevalent that I could just get a PPK inside the waistband holster. So.
Yeah, I mean, custom people would. If you were in that, in that community back then, it's like 95. Sure. I remember I had a couple Alessi's, probably. But the old one, not the new stuff's probably great. Yeah. I keep meaning to get some new stuff just to try it out, but I have probably 10 different old school ones from the mid 90s. And a couple of those were the inside the waistband, type, a big square kind of thing that would fit down, but they existed, and I trained with it before I came into the military. But it was, you had to go out and search it. The Team 4 wasn't going to look into that for you and get you a custom.
No. Like the first low vis thing I did downrange, I was all excited about it. And the ops chief goes, hey, go down and get your load out. I go down and I tell the guys, hey, I got these cool orders. I'm going to go down. I need my concealed carry load out. And they all looked at me like I was stoned. Yeah. And the chief that we had at the time, great guy, he was, I think he felt pity for me because he realized that I didn't know what I was talking about. And he reached into his drawer and he pulls out, at the time, the only inside the waistband holster that I ever saw for like 5-6 years. And he threw it at me. And he's like, here, this is it. And I look at it and I didn't know what to do with it. It's the first time that I ever saw an inside the waistband holster. And it was a Bianchi. It had a soft, the soft leather that was pliable. So it was all kind of like, it collapsed, but it had a rigid band around the mouth and it had a thumb brake. It had a single clip on it. And I can remember taking this thing and trying to figure out how to clip it on the outside of my pants.
Yeah. If you don't know, if no one's telling you, you've never seen one before, I can totally see that. All.
So the guy, I remember he looks at me and he's like, it goes inside your pants.
Yeah.
And I was like, what? You want me to put this in my pants? So that became the early part of my career as far as like doing stuff low vis. I didn't have and the funny thing was that holster that he threw to me, it was a Bianchi inside the waistband holster for Beretta 92F, and we're carrying SIGs. So I couldn't even use the damn thing.
It's so
But
funny.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. I kept trying to fit everything into it, not knowing what it meant.
Yeah.
So I rolled dirty for like first couple deployments, no holster, just inside the waistband, and that's just how you did it back then. I had a shoulder holster that I carried in the jungle, but
I heard of guys doing that. Vietnam guys told me about that. Yeah.
I carried in a shoulder holster underneath my camis. That was kind of like, that when I got down to that thing, things were really bad.
Yep. Actually, I had Alessi build me one for my first platoon because those Vietnam guys had told me that. So I had a titanium Smith & Wesson back then, the small, 357 and 38.
Yeah.
So I had that for that reason because of those Vietnam guys, thinking that's how I was going to use it with jungle in mind. So I still have it somewhere.
So cool.
I still have it. I think it's in I think that survived. I'm pretty sure.
Dude, that right there is a piece of history. Yeah. Lou was such a craftsman. He was such an amazing craftsman. So if you have that thing, that is history. I mean, back then there were 3 holster manufacturers that were worth their salt. Lou from Lou Alessi, the folks over at Kramer Leather. I have some Kramer holsters for my SIG that that thing it was a black holster, but now it's gray from the age. The leather has just aged so much. But when I insert the SIG, the 226 into it, you can still hear it click in. It was designed and manufactured so well. Those holsters are just that's craftsmanship.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what
I still have my SIG Alessi because I used that for years. I love that. Mine. Yeah. I used that through my whole time, especially when I was doing, agency stuff or whatever, when I didn't need it to be like, if I wasn't going to be on a helicopter hanging upside down possibly or something, like when I was doing more other stuff, then I had that. That's what I used. But when I put the tactical stuff on, then I had something that would secure it. And by then there was Kydex and all the rest of it. But if I was doing something in like shirts like you're wearing right now, a collar shirt, I always had that leather Alessi. It went on every deployment with me.
That's so cool, man. Dude, that is so cool. And like I said, he was such when I got into the industry and got into like the gear stuff, I was very fortunate to work with those 3 manufacturers. And I worked with Lou on a lot of RDT&E stuff. Oh, nice. And I got, some of the holsters that he built for me were prototypes that never made it to production that I still have that are just amazing holsters. I don't use them. Lou was in my life during my 1911 phase. Yep,
I have a couple of 1911. I have inside the waistband, full size inside the waistband from him, and I have outside the waistband, of course, too.
Yeah. So he kind of like came into my life during the 1911 phase. So most of the holsters I have from Lou are 1911s. I got a few Glocks and a couple, maybe one SIG holster, but yeah, all the 1911 holsters that I have are virtually all from Lou himself, and are just beautiful holsters. Love those holsters, man.
Yep. No, they're serious. They're serious. And so when you're out doing this close target reconnaissance, you got the Walter PPK. By the way, I wish we had some more of that cool stuff at Team 5 when I got there. There was, I think we had 1911s, but they were from not the Army Marksmanship Unit, but they were whoever was we used to have those competition teams that would go around and do that back then. Yeah. And they weren't doing it when I got there, but they still had some of those 1911s. So I got to mess around with those a little bit. But remember there was a magazine, it was like an offshoot, a spinoff of Soldier of Fortune back in the early 80s, maybe mid 80s, but certainly not late 80s. Gung Ho magazine, and they had these two. I remember that. They had these two SEALs coming out of the water. I don't know if they have draggers on. I think in my mind they have draggers on, but they might actually have scuba stuff on. I don't know. And I think they're holding like Mac 10s. I think as they're coming out of the water.
I remember that. Yes. The Mac
I wish
10
we had
was
some of that stuff.
The Mac 10, like, because sometimes some of these regions that we would go to were, back then, just they were hot zones. We couldn't call them a war zone, but they were certainly a non-permissive environment. Just they didn't go by the term war zone. And we would have to move from our hotel to, say, the base that we would go and train on. And it was a full-on mobility movement where we would move there. But we also had a requirement to not be so blatantly obvious about who we were, so that meant that we couldn't really pack our ARs or any of those things. We had to be more low vis. So that's where the Mac 10 and the MP5K was really, really valuable. Like I have one of my LPOs, I swear to God that I'm not kidding you. He ran dual Mac 10s.
No way. Like Invasion USA, Chuck Norris.
Exactly.
Getting after it. Man. Dude, was he in a cutoff jean shirt? That would have been cool.
No, he had his pea coat on over it. And it was, but he looked so, and like,
even better.
And I remember I gave him shit. I was like, that's never going to work. That's a waste, And one day at the range, he literally went double fisting because he used tubular nylon to create this crisscross shoulder rig.
Wow.
That they hung under, and he had the 10-round magazines in there.
Oh my.
And he literally, when he pushed out, just like the MP5 on a sling, where we would just run with the sling, he would just push them out. And I'm telling you, close range weapon, 20 rounds from that Mac 10. Dude, toast. He just like, he just
20 rounds from anything. I don't want 1 round from anything.
He just did this like short little strafing run left and right, and it was over in like 0.2 of a second. I don't know how fast those magazines went, but I was like, okay, yes, that will work. We can.
Oh my gosh,
we'll run with those, So that was hilarious, man. I remember that, and so we would basically roll in civvies with unmarked vehicles. Sometimes they were rental cars, sometimes they were loaners from the units that we were working with. Every now and then we'd have some military vehicles from the embassy that they would loan us, but we really didn't want those just because that was such a bullet magnet. We wanted to blend in and be as low key as we possibly could, just because we had to move from our hotel to the to wherever the training area was. And sometimes, it was, there was a couple times when we were deployed to some of these regions that bad things were happening. So, civilians that were Americans were down there doing whatever, were kidnapped or killed. And, we happened to be in theater when that would happen. And so there would be this massive reaction. And, sometimes that meant that we got locked down in our hotels. Sometimes that meant that we could only under certain circumstances mobilize to our training sites and stuff like that. It just all depended. Sometimes some countries were a little bit more comfortable with us, going and doing our thing and being responsible for our own safety, versus others that would say the only way that you can go someplace is if you have an armed escort from local, from the local, whoever the unit is that you're working with. They would have to roll heavy to us. We would jump in with them, and then we'd roll with them back to the training unit. And sometimes that worked, sometimes it didn't.
That's wild, man. And so what's happening as everything's gearing up for Just Cause? What's your mission on that when you're going in to do battle damage assessment, like night of the invasion? How do you get there? Where are you? Are you set up like in on a hillside? Are you in an urban hide site? Or what are you doing?
So what ended up happening was our platoon was, I would say the mission changed while we were in country. The mission changed. That happened up at the unit, or I'm sorry, that happened up at the team area. And so the team mobilized, kind of like a task unit, basically, and they came down, and that became the mission. Basically, was that we were responsible for the airfield, which is where we believed at the time that Noriega was going to escape. If he could get to his private jet, he could escape and be, in a non-extradition country in hours. So, and then the whole point behind the invasion was to capture him. So that would have been a huge failure. So we were originally going in, and we were supposed to immobilize the aircraft via standoff weapons. We were basically going to Z-bird in to the edge of the airfield. The airfield was right on the coastline. So we were going to Z-bird in, patrol up to the edge of the airfield, and then using standoff weapons, just neutralize all aircraft that were in sight, or any aircraft
with like 50s and 40 Mike, or what's
mainly the 50, the Mark 88, the sniper rifle that we had back then. That was the 50, and that platoon was stacked with snipers. I mean,
and that's the McMillan Remington 700 action. That's okay.
Yep. That thing was a beast.
Yeah.
But it was ridiculously accurate. I mean, just such a beautiful gun to shoot. So we had those laid out. And then we had your regular 7.62 rifles for more of like the softer targets.
Okay.
But, our intention was that we would, if the aircraft doesn't have operating or, any wheels that turn, then the aircraft's not going anywhere. Yeah. So
this is a good plan. This is a good plan.
That plan was
use the 50s.
Replaced. Mm-hmm. Yep, that plan was replaced with putting boots on the ground and actually securing the airfield so that if he did get there, we could capture him. That was the idea behind that. So that changed the entire profile. So what ended up happening was
how long between execution and did you get that? Get that word we're going to change this up instead of going like we planned with the 50s and using that weapon system essentially as it was designed to take out planes and cars.
Yes, exactly. It was all
instead of that
stuff.
Now we're going to hit this airfield and essentially we're going to get online and we're going to take this thing down.
Exactly, which is exactly what they did. To be honest, I can't remember the exact timeline. I do remember getting called in to the platoon hut and being told that we're standing down, and that was disappointment like you can't imagine. I mean, I just like, fuck. Well, I'm sure, of course you can't imagine, but for everybody else, they probably can't imagine what that means. You basically, you're on deck to go, to swing away, and then all of a sudden you're back in the dugout.
Wow.
But what we ended up doing was we ended up converting into, we splintered off into various little fire teams to go throughout the rest of the region and do stuff. And what I ended up doing was
well, before you get to that, did they tell you why you guys were not going to do it that way?
I mean, later we found out why. And I can only speculate that the thing that I had an issue with, like, that was stuff that was happening way outside my pay grade. Right. I didn't, it's not my decision to pass judgment on that decision. But what I took issue with was when they told us that we could not use HE on any of the targets. And that to me was like, so that meant my 40 Mike was out of play. We couldn't,
why? Because collateral damage.
They didn't want collateral damage, or they wanted to minimize collateral damage.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
minimize collateral damage, but that doesn't mean no HE, no 40 Mike. No.
Exactly. So, this was my introduction to how to say this without it coming across poorly. It was my introduction to, at that time, before then, I thought everybody above me was a dialed in leader, just a legit solid dude. I mean, guys, because that was my experience. The guys that I worked directly under, they were spot on. All the decisions they made, everything that we did, it was always legit.
Like, you never thought this guy's making this decision to advance his career, or because he's risk adverse, or because he's scared of X, Y, or Z.
Exactly.
He's taking this decision for mission accomplishment. This is where you find out that
what it takes to get the job done. And that was like the hair standing up on my arm right now, thinking about that. Just the, it was about the mission, what it takes to get the mission done. That's what we're there for. That's what our job was. Our job, we knew we were going in harm's way. Everybody that deploys knows you're going in harm's way. There's no getting around that. And that's what we're there for. Like I never once thought that this was too risky or that I was going to die or, people were going to recklessly endanger myself and my teammates. I never thought that. But after that happened, I did start to like see things more clearly. Like, oh, okay. So there are troop leaders, and then there are parade leaders. And, I really worked hard to just make sure that I was always with a troop leader and not with a parade leader. And, unfortunately, you can't always make those choices. You go where the Navy tells you to go. And I was very fortunate that through my career, I worked for some amazing troop leaders that, made me the man that I am today.
Yeah.
And even the parade leaders taught me something, though. They taught me what I didn't want to be.
Yeah.
And they taught me what I didn't want to do.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to be that, and I don't want to do that.
Did you find out ever why did they say why you weren't just being shifted from taking on this role, essentially maybe an L ambush and taking out this aircraft with 50s, why you were not just being shifted from that? Okay, now we're not going to do that. Maybe we keep you in support, but another element's going to come through, or we're all going to go to the airfield and we're going to take this thing down, which for people listening, they're like, might be thinking, isn't that what Rangers do?
Yeah, exactly.
But so did they ever tell you that?
I talked to some of the other guys in the platoon, and basically what happened was once we got on the ground, things started to change at the team area, and they started to I think what happened was they put us on the ground as an emergency assault force. And I think what they started to do was that bought them some time to formulate a new strategy and then to actually rehearse it up at the team area. So what I was told from some of the guys in the platoons was that they got together and they started putting together a plan, and they started rehearsing it literally there I'm sure it's gone now, but there used to be a parade ground not too far from the team area, and they marked off kind of like the distance and the dimensions of the airfield and how they were going to approach it from, basically the Z-birds and stuff like that. They still did a Z-bird, insertion with all those guys, which was a lot of Z-birds. And
that's
so
Zodiacs for people listening.
Yeah. So, but no, they, I don't really know what the true reason was, and I don't want to speculate per se, but like I said, what I saw, the decisions that were being made at like the command staff level, to me, they weren't letting us do what we knew how to do. They were asking us to do something that we could do, but we probably shouldn't do.
Gotcha.
And that was kind of like my take on it. Like everything from what they did, the rehearsals, like how they were doing that. I mean, that's something, any assault force can do that. You're segmented into, compartmentalized elements that you can assault pretty much anything. The fact that it's a runway doesn't change that per se, but like you said, there are dudes that's exactly what they do. So, and from what I understand too, the Rangers were tasked with Rio Hato, which is another area up north of where we were. So my job, the reason why I got inserted on the 19th was to put eyes on a bridge that was the choke point for the reinforcements. So there was reinforcements that could arrive at the airfield, and they would, the fastest way to get to the airfield was to take this route that led over this bridge. There was another route that was 30 minutes. So we knew that if they didn't come over this bridge, the guys on the airfield had 30 minutes to mop up and exfil.
Okay.
Or else get ready for, some sort of engagement. If they came our way over the bridge, it was more like 6 or 7 minutes. I can't remember what the exact timeline was. So it's very important that we were eyes on. And on top of that, we had higher authority to blow the bridge if we saw the reactionary force coming our way. So there was me and one other guy. It was just two guys, basically. We put eyes on this thing. And I swam an MP5 and a 60 and an M79.
Wow.
Because there was just the two of us. That's all there was.
That is awesome. So how did you do that? Like where were you going from one side to the other? What were you?
So we inserted via an indigenous craft called a cayuca. And basically it's just like a hollowed out canoe of sorts.
Okay.
But down there it's called a cayuca. And we basically, we got as many haversack bladders as we possibly could to keep all the equipment afloat as best as we could. There's no way we're swimming all that shit. I mean, dude, I had so much fucking ammo.
Wow.
I had anything I could stuff in my pockets. I had it because there was just the two of us. And my thought process was, okay, if that bridge gets blown, what side are we on and what side are they on?
Yeah.
And so we set up with eyes on, and I had direct contact with the Spectre gunship. That was an amazing asset. Boy, I'll tell you what, anytime Spectre was overhead, I just had this warm and fuzzy.
Still to this day.
Till 100%. And what's really cool is I was able to call in a fire mission that they actually did down there that made it to the greatest hits. So when we went back to Holbert Airfield for a couple deployments later, a couple workups later, we're down at Holbert getting our fam with the Special Operations Wing down there.
Great spot.
And they put in,
great spot.
I love that.
Yeah, it's awesome.
They put in like a this is back in the day when we had VHS tapes. So they put in a VHS tapes of all their greatest hits.
And it's on there.
And it's on there.
Yeah, because there's probably not that many at that point, you know?
No, there really weren't. But it was so cool because I remember I'm looking at an aerial view of something that I only saw from the ground. And I'm like, that looks kind of familiar. And I remember after the brief, I asked one of the tech sergeants there, I was like, hey, does anybody know any details about, where these came from? And the guy's like, oh, yeah. And turns out that one of the tech sergeants that was there assigned at that time was one of the guys in the bird.
That's wild.
That actually was on that mission.
So you're a new guy essentially, calling in airstrikes, swimming across the river, like getting ready to blow a bridge. That's for that time frame. That's serious business.
It was a lot of fun. I'm not gonna lie. And nothing happened. Unfortunately, they opted. What I remember was the reactionary force, because Rio Hato was being hit as well by the Rangers. The reactionary force opted to go up to Rio Hato, which was unfortunate for them, for the Rangers, because they had a bad spot. And a lot of Rangers went in the tree and the swamp, and they lost a lot of equipment. I think they had a couple of
jumping in.
Yeah, they jumped in. And I actually, what's so funny is one of my close friends was a Ranger that jumped in Panama.
Wow.
And we've stayed close friends ever since. So I got a lot of firsthand knowledge about that operation because he was on it and talked a little bit about kind of what went wrong.
Wow.
But the reactionary force opted to go to Rio Hato versus Paitilla, which was the airfield. And so nothing ever happened for us. We sat there until we got eventually extracted. And, it was like, okay, humping, there's this, and I think you can appreciate this. When you're humping all that shit in there, the idea of all that weight doesn't really kind of enter your mind.
Yeah.
But then when you have to exfil, and you didn't get to
it's heavier.
Any of the ordnance, it's a lot heavier. It's like I don't understand it. I don't get it. But like
it's physics.
I feel like I almost died trying to swim all that shit back out. And luckily the Cayuga came in. There was no requirement for stealth at that point, but we just he came in close enough to where we can kind of like get it like the chest deep water. And
that's amazing.
Load it up. Yeah.
All right, today I want to talk about Protect.com. That is PROTEKT.com. Started by my buddy Nick Norris from the SEAL teams, who was recently on the podcast. He's all about health and wellness and living that best life. So what we have here, hydration, immunity, energy, rest, liquid packs. Because we all want to feel our best. We dream of waking up with plenty of energy to excel at our work, our personal lives, and have a great workout every single day. But the reality is, very few of us do that. That's why Protect was started. And you can grab a convenient pack right here. This is energy. So this has been boosting me through my latest novel. And look at that. It's a liquid pack right there. You just, bam, add it to a glass, add a little water, and you are good to go. So hydration, Love the hydration and the immunity and the clarity, which I'm going to take as soon as this podcast is over and I get back to writing. So all of that plus the rest. How important is that rest? Right here, take that an hour and a half before bed for some great sleep. And for hydration right here, 30 minutes after you wake up and right before your workout. So swap that daily energy drink for the energy. Try that hydration, that immunity, that rest. And they also have products like this, Reef Safe Sunscreen, SPF 50. Protect right there. And right now you can get 25% off. Go to protect.com. That is protect.com/dangerclose for 25% off. Go check them out. Then did you have a, for lack of a better term, an Indige or a Host Nation Force, or was one of your guys that was
one of our guys drove that Cayuga in? What happened was off the coastline there at Paitea was a patrol craft, a PC, which was kind of like our. It wasn't our TOC, but it was a mobile TOC. That's where
like the old school PCs, like the a huge PT boat, like a
yep.
If people think of a Coast Guard ship,
cutter,
it was kind of like that.
Cutter.
Yeah,
a little smaller than that.
Yeah, a little smaller,
but yeah, back in the day. And it kind of was the like did everything. It was a medevac. It was the mobile command. It was
interesting idea. I mean, interesting idea to have that. I worked on one once, but it was kind of ended up being almost like the HK Mark 23 45 pistol.
Dude, totally different. Way different.
It's like we didn't get to use. Like, you're gonna use this? It's pretty heavy. What's this thing? It's like a cutter. Do the Navy? Do we have a smaller thing? What? It was just searching for that mission. But this seems like a place where it would have made sense.
Oh yeah, actually, and they were over the horizon during the operation, during the assault on the airfield. And then and we could see it. We were close enough that all the tracer rounds are coming over us. Tracer rounds everywhere. You can hear all the explosions going off all over town and whatnot.
When you're still overlooking the bridge.
Yeah. So I mean, because we weren't that far. We were maybe 2 or 3 clicks away, maybe
from the airfield or from the
airfield. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
So you heard everything go down.
Pretty much. We saw it too. I mean, you could see all everything. There were some HE material used during that time period, even though we were told not to. And I remember once we got extracted. No, we didn't take nods with us. Yeah. I mean, luckily for us, the bridge was so close to the water, the roadway was so close to the water that we only had to hump in maybe a couple hundred meters. And ironically, the road was also illuminated. So it had streetlights on it. So we really didn't where we were at. We were perched. We were up on a sand dune overlooking that whole area. And we had pretty good, we had a decent field of fire. I mean, it would have obviously against the reactionary force probably would not have lasted very long, but it would have been long enough to beat feet and just swim out in the water and, just kind of evade that way. But once we extracted, we got retasked to go to the PC, and once we got to the PC, it was starting to get light. And what we ended up doing was we ended up starting to do resupplies. So I went ashore onto the airfield to resupply a bunch of the guys. I mean, I knew everybody that was on the airfield. I mean, it was, everybody that was there, I knew everybody.
Did you know what happened by then? Like, where do you learn that something's going on? Or when you're on the hillside there, are you like, something's going on there? Or were you like, yeah, we're winning? Or were you like,
I wouldn't know. Yeah, I did not know until it wasn't, one of my future roommates, he was a 60 gunner. And as soon as I saw him, he was holed up in one little kind of they fortified a position where they had coverage on the entrance for the airfield, and they put about 2 or 3 60s there, and he was one of them. And I'm just carrying as much ammo as I could possibly carry. Everything that was on that PC I put on my body or put in the boat and took ashore. Everything, grenades, HE, as many boxes of 7.62 as I could possibly carry. I had probably 6 bandoliers of 7.62 strapped, not in that soft pouch that we used to have, the soft pouch with the strap. I just kept putting them over me, and I kept thinking that if I fall over this boat, I'm going to the bottom. I'm going to Davy Jones's locker on a freight elevator, basically. Wow. So when I get there and I see him laying there, and we heard about what it we heard that there were injuries, and then by that point we heard that there were deaths. And we get on the airfield, and I immediately just start tossing ammo to everybody, like, putting ammo by the 60 gunners, taking, the grenadiers that I knew, just taking all my HE that I had and leaving it with them. And I hunkered down. I laid down, took a position on the perimeter, and I'm like, I'm not going anywhere. And the closest that I ever came to disobeying a direct order was then. I was God bless him. Our XO at the time comes over, taps me on the shoulder, because I had ignored all the radio calls, taps me on the shoulder and goes, you need to go back to the PC. Mm. And I was like, what? Playing dumb. Like, what? I don't know what you're talking about. And he's like, go back to the PC. And I'm like, fuck. Yeah. So reluctantly, I could probably see myself just like moping along to the water line where the Z-Bird was, and just kind of, and of course I did catch a bunch of flack for disregarding the superior's orders to return to the PC. But like those guys we took heavies. I mean, there's a lot of bad things that happened there, and if we were still supposed to be manning that position, they needed every workable gun on target as long as we were going to man it. So I was, I was young. I think I might have been 21 at that point. Wow. Maybe 20 or 21.
For people that are wondering what we're talking about, can you describe what happened there? People are like, what is that?
So what ended up happening was the guys moved off and started patrolling off the runway. Basically, it actually might have been the closest to the hangars, and they had basically a staggered file formation with platoons, basically, one platoons on the left, platoons on the right. They were stacked, double stacked, which means that there was a lot of dudes walking down there. And what ended up happening was there were more than one bad guy on target. There was more than one, but only one that they can recall one of them was responsible for most of the carnage, because he came out from around a corner and emptied his AK straight up the file.
Wow. So
the guys in the rear are the ones that took the heavy, the brunt of it, if you will. And then, he was dispatched, and, but the damage had been done at that point. I mean, it was over as quickly as it started. There was some sporadic gunfire from other areas, quickly neutralized. And, the mission kind of changed at that point. They were able to adapt to the situation. There was a lot of wounded that had to be cared for. The corpsman that was in the class before me was one of the guys that was on that airfield doing a lot of the stuff. Because one of the other corpsmen that was on the airfield was one of the other injured guys. He took an AK round to the head. And was still combat effective. I mean, I love telling this story about him. What ended up happening was, from what I understand, it was a round that hit his skull, and basically the angle from which it came, it just blew off the top of his skull, or blew back the top of his skull. And when the other corpsman crawls over to him, he's instructing the junior corpsman on how to prepare his head for transport. Then he also is asking for his rifle, and he's telling the guys, hey, replace my magazine, because it's almost empty. And then he's telling the guys, lay the rifle on my legs so I know where it's at, all while he's getting medically cared for a head injury. So, I mean, the dude just never stopped fighting, was in the fight the whole time. So, just pretty amazing stuff, actually.
That is wild, man.
Yeah.
That is crazy. You're essentially still a new guy.
Pretty much.
This point.
Yeah.
Gosh. And then those guys, what do they do? Do they fly those guys right out of there? Do they go somewhere else first to then fly.
Yep. They flew him to Brooks Air Force Base, which is in my hometown.
Wow.
So a lot of the guys that were injured, they went there, and my mom and dad found out, obviously it made the news. My mom and dad found out, and they went to the hospital, and they brought care packages, they brought food, they did a lot of stuff.
Wow.
And the funny part, so I virtually lied to my mom my entire naval career. I mean, everything that we did back then at that early stages was all classified. When we deployed, we couldn't tell anybody where we went. So my mom thought I was in California.
Yeah. So
some of the guys that are in the hospital, and she's like, oh, I'm so happy to know that you're alive. My son, he's with SEAL Team 4, but he's in California. And they're like, who's your son? Oh, Jeff Gonzales. He's not in California.
Oh, they told her.
Oh,
come on, day one, week one.
Oh.
Jeez.
Well, what's funny was an ex-girlfriend actually was the one that ratted me out.
Of course.
She saw an image on one of the news clips of me in the background. I was escorting some prisoners that we had taken to the assembly area, the basically the camp that we were processing all the enemy combatants. And it just so happened that I walked past the camera as I was escorting these prisoners to this facility. And it's a profile picture of me. I'm like, I've been in the field. Like when we talk about BUDS and we talk about Hell Week and the importance behind Hell Week, I literally lived Hell Week for real. I didn't sleep. We were just turning and burning. As soon as we come back in, rearm, refit, and then we're back out. We're redeploying. So I must have looked like death because I had like just reapplied cami paint, and I'm wearing camis that are customized. They're not your dress camis that you would go to an event in. They're trash. I smell. I've been in the, I'm an abomination to look at basically. But she caught a profile picture of me and she goes to my house. She knocks on my door. She lived in the neighborhood back then. And she goes, Mrs. Gonzales, I'm a little worried. Do you know where Jeff is? She's like, oh yeah, he's in California. Oh, thank goodness. Because, I could have swore I saw him on TV. So technically it was one of my ex-girlfriends that ratted me out, but my mom, she reassured her that I could not be in a war zone because I told her over the phone that I was in California.
Right.
So, that was kind of a funny experience.
That's wild. What were you guys doing for the rest of how long were you there after that?
So that's another interesting story. My first deployment, normal deployment's about 6 months, but we went down there a month early. And then the platoon that was coming down to relieve us lost a guy kind of at the last minute. And my platoon OIC and my platoon chief both came up to me and said, hey, you should probably consider jumping from this platoon to that platoon. And I'm like, okay. I was
so just staying essentially. You just jumped right into one. Yeah.
I jumped right into another platoon in theater. They came down a man short. I stepped into that platoon. So I did like 13-ish plus months on my first deployment. Yeah.
That's amazing.
I didn't come back to this. I didn't come back to the team area for over a year.
Wow.
Over a year on my first deployment.
Jeez. And what were you doing then after the airfield? Were you guys going out doing?
We did a lot of, so there was, there were some of the, so even though Noriega had been rounded up, we had him in the embassy at that one time. So he wasn't going anywhere. And that became the responsibility of Delta at that point. So they kind of took over that. And so a lot of the other, but that was the top of the chain, if you will. There was a bunch of other high value targets that we wanted to still capture that we continue to do operations for. So for like the next couple of weeks, we just kept going out, pursuing these guys. A lot of times, like no shit, there'd be like the smoking ashtray on the target that we were just
no at. Way. How would you use? Do you have human intel, or did you guys have
a lot of it? Yep.
Really?
We were going, and that was another thing that I got a chance to do was actually go out and kind of start to myself and the intel guy assigned to the unit, a fleet sailor intel guy, great guy, but he was actually Panamanian.
Huh.
So we had this amazing insider that
wow.
we got some really good, like he knew where to go to get information.
Oh, geez.
Yeah. So we were a couple of times, we dumped in on a bunch of his mistress's places, and that's where we found like the smoking, the burning cigarettes.
That's wild.
Food still on the table. Like he basically was just one step, like all these people were like one step ahead of us.
Yeah.
And we rolled a couple of them up. We got a lot. We did a bunch of caches. We hit a bunch of caches. There was a rumor that HVT was in the marina hiding out on some of these boats that were in the marina. So we went out and just did it took us an entire day to board every one of those ships in the marina. And we found I think there were 3 ships that we actually pulled, arms off of at the time it was contraband, guns and any ordnance that we could find, we were pulling, and we had this giant pile of ordnance in the unit that we just continue to throw shit on there. Just every time we'd go out, we'd collect something. Yeah. So there was some really good post, after the airfield, the post-op stuff that we were doing was pretty active for a while. We went out and then we kind of shifted into the traditional counter drug mission. We started doing more of that and getting back out there in the field. And, this was also at a time when the DEA was very active overseas at pursuing some of these. So we were we'd augment with some of the DEA guys that would go out and pursue some of these guys. So that's actually
a ton of experience for that time frame,
dude. It was a fantastic, like I said, after you leave that, you're always trying to get back to it.
Right.
You're always trying to get back to it. It's just, I can't explain it. Guys know what I'm talking about. You're always, whatever you can do, whatever it takes to get back to that kind of scenario or that kind of situation. That's what you're doing.
Did you know how unique that was for a new guy to have so much experience like that? Or were you like, oh, every deployment's like this? This is life. I
found out very quickly that is not the case because things changed.
Yeah.
We went back into kind of like, I had a hard time moving back into peacetime conditions.
Yeah, normal.
Yeah. Because, for 13 plus months, that's all I did. The second deployment was much more calmer.
Yeah.
We didn't have nearly the same op tempo. There wasn't the
country wasn't getting invaded. But...
Yeah, exactly. So It was a little different, and that helped me to kind of like come down a notch. But still, dude, everywhere we went, I'm always looking, always wanting.
That's
always,
amazing. And for people that don't know, also there was 2 guys from SEAL Team 2 that swam across the Panama Canal and placed 1 or 2 limpet mines on 2 limpet mines on Noriega's yacht and blew that thing, which is a cool story too.
That was awesome because that so what people don't know is that the Panama Canal has some of the fastest moving water in it, because when the locks open up,
it goes,
it's just this vacuum of water. Wow. So those guys, legitimate combat swimmer op, because the canal is also, it's like mud water. It's just it's not, and they did it at night too. So they hit the Panamanian patrol crafts, which were they were his yacht also got hit, but we didn't have to worry so much about his yacht as we did the PCs, because the PCs, their Panamanian patrol coastal patrol boats had some heavy equipment on it. Like they had some, I don't remember what it was. It was like some sort of chain gun up front, and they had a bunch of machine guns on the back, and they had some other shit on there that I can't remember, but it could have posed a threat to the guys on the airfield had it been able to launch, because it was right around the corner from where it was parked. It, like the airfield was literally, you're talking about maybe getting it underway and getting it over there 20 to 30 minutes. It could have been on site, and just that would have been bad. So that was a target that had been identified during that battlefield prep phase that we needed, and there was more than one, I think. So they hit both of them, and it was the it was the perfect op. Well, with the exception of dealing with the current and all the other crazy shit that happened, the planting of the limpets, the way the limpets worked, everything, you do this all, you go through however long your combat swimmer phase, and you're just planning these things on the target ships, but to actually get a chance to see or observe how well those things worked.
Yeah.
I mean, for people that don't know what it is, a limpet mine is basically a shape charge that has a magnetic case around it that is attached to the hull of the ship. Typically, we try to put them on the seams of the hull so that as it blows as the charge blows inward, it also peels the seams inward, so it creates a bigger hole. And which is exactly what they did. They put it on the seams, and it was at dock. It was moored up, and that one of those things took on water fast, and it was not going anywhere.
Yeah.
That thing was toast.
Amazing.
It was interesting because one little mine, I think it's got like 1.5 pounds of C4 in it. One little mine took out that entire PC.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
cool.
It seems like it should have more than that when I'm thinking about how, wearing those things before you get in the water. And it seems like it should have more than that, but maybe that is probably it.
I want to think it has 1.5 pounds of C4 packed in there.
Yeah.
I want to think. I could be wrong.
Yeah, someone will let us know in the comments. Oh my gosh, that is fantastic. That is wow. That is an amazing first deployment. And so you come home from that. What do you do from there? Come back to the team, and now you're back after 13 months, essentially in a war zone. What do you do now? Do you start a full workup with a platoon?
Back into it. Yeah, I did only 4 workups, but 5 deployments.
Wow. Yeah.
And then I did a stint in training cell, and then I went to the West Coast to finish my career as a BUDS instructor. Yeah.
Yeah. That's where I met you. But what were those other deployments? Did you go multiple countries in Central South America?
So back then Unit 8 was our forward deploying base. So we would go to Unit 8, and then from Unit 8, we would go all over Central and South America. I hit every country in Central and South America with the exception of French Guiana and Papua New Guinea.
Wow.
Those were the only 2 places that I did not hit.
Amazing.
Yeah, every other place, I put boots on the ground in every other country in Central and South America.
Wow.
Except for Mexico. Right. Mexico I did not go to until after the Navy. Officially. After the Navy.
Is it advise and assist type stuff or counter drug ops or combination?
So in the beginning, everything was counter drug. Everything we did was counter drug. We worked with our counterparts. So just about every country in Central and South America has a naval assault force of some sort. Some of them are, in a lot of those third world countries, they just don't have the capacity to maintain a fighting force that we would consider to be representative of who we are. There are 2 countries that actually have a pretty impressive force. And what's interesting is that, and you see it when you're in BUDS, you have foreign nationals in your BUDS class. Maybe you didn't, but
we didn't.
I know. Yeah, I had two guys from Thailand, great guys, but I know of plenty of others. So the Goas and the Foes, which were the El Salvadorian and the Peruvian special operation, the naval side, basically they're the SEALs for those countries. Those guys dialed in. I mean, they were every bit as, obviously in today's parlance, they probably are not as capable as we are, but back then those guys were throwing down. Like I can remember we went down to Peru, and the unit that we were working with, and basically they have like a mini BUDS compound. They had like basically a replica of our O course, the BUDS compound itself. All of that is basically because cool. Most of their command staff were all junior officers that went through BUDS,
right?
That then returned.
Yeah, same thing with South Korea.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's amazing to watch the impact that we had on those units that built it. That literally built a replica of our force in their country. It was really cool. And I remember we're doing jungle warfare with these guys. Okay. And like for the majority of my platoons, I was a point man. And I would coordinate with the host country's point man, and we would talk shop and trade stories and stuff like that. And like, I remember when we're leaving the base, we're getting inserted. SBU was usually always around the corner for us. They're the special built unit guys back then. Now they're called SWIC, but back then they were the SBU guys. And they'd insert us, and we'd go and do some practice patrolling. And we basically line up side by side. So me and my point man, we would walk together, and then, you know, the OICs would walk together and the machine gunners would walk together, and they're just basically passing knowledge. Like, hey, you see this over here? You know, we're like, this is how we'd set up for, you know, quick, you know, short perimeter kind of thing. This is how we set up for a long perimeter. And so we're just passing knowledge right there. So this point man, when we get off the boat, I remember we set security, and he looks back at his OIC, and his OIC gives him the nod. So he stops, and he kind of huddles up next to me, and he just kind of like gives me the signal, hey, you know, you got security. And I'm like, okay, cool, I got it. So, and I proceed to watch him take his boots off, tie the laces together, loop them over his neck. So for that patrol, he patrolled barefooted in the jungle. And I'm like, I look back at my OIC, and I'm like, don't even get any ideas about me doing that. I am not taking my boots off. Like, I never wore dive socks in my boots, so I just wore the boots over my bare feet.
Oh, really?
Yeah. You know, when you spend that much time in the jungle, like, there's a couple things that you learn. First, it takes 3 days to dry a GI issue pair of jungle boots. Okay. So I had 3 sets of jungle boots, and every morning I'd start with dry boots. And my feet, the dive socks, I never felt comfortable wearing dive socks. I always felt like the dive socks actually made my feet soft. Like, because your feet are always wet. So the dive sock, not having a dive sock stuffed in my boot wet, keeping my feet wet, kept my feet a little tougher. Okay. But not nearly as tough as that guy walking.
Yeah, that's serious. I mean, you heard the stories from Vietnam about that too.
Exactly.
I'm wearing the Delta 68 Origin jeans right now.
No way.
Yeah, as a tribute to those guys.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
dude,
jeans.
I wore jeans in the jungle too. I mean, literally, I did. Yeah, I wore jeans. There's a platoon picture of me wearing a pair of jeans and, you know, cami top is a uniform that I would wear. So I did wear jeans. And the thing about wearing jeans in the jungle, and when you talk to some of the Vietnam guys, the reason why they did it was that they were having a hard time resupplied with pants. So they had jeans that they would wear on Liberty calls. So they started wearing jeans, and jeans were easier to get in country than fatigues that they would wear at the time. So that was one of the stories that I was told about why they wore jeans.
They weren't just being cool.
No, but it turns out that they were cool. So
yeah, great photos.
So what I found about wearing jeans was that once you got a really good pair that were super kind of comfortable to wear, didn't restrict your movement, one of the things that they did better than the camis was mosquitoes. So mosquitoes would still be able to, especially like if you took a knee and you're in the material on your top leg, the knee that's not on the ground would stretch tight across your thigh. And somehow or another, mosquitoes know that's a easy prick. You know, they can go in there because apparently when that material is spread so taut across your leg, it's easier to penetrate. Yeah. But jeans, on the other hand, can't get through them. So that was one good reason about wearing jeans, was I never had to worry about mosquito bites on my legs. Okay. You still get them all over the rest of your body, but not so much on your legs. So yeah. Those guys were pretty legit. Though they trained hard. They did. And what was funny was I remember on that same trip, we get done Monday through Friday, and then Saturday we would spend it on the weekends doing our thing. They would do their thing. Friday, I remember the Peruvian chief comes up to my chief and says, "Hey, really sorry, we can't train today. This is Friday. We can't train today. We have to go into the jungle. We have to go do this." And we were like, "Okay, yeah, sure, no problem. We'll see you on Monday." So 3-day weekend, Monday rolls around. The platoon that we were training with comes back. There's a guy on crutches that walks into the ready room. There's a guy that's got like a bandage around his arm or something like that. And there's like maybe 1 or 2 guys that are missing. And we're like, what happened? Oh, you know, we patrolled in, we made contact, we killed a bunch of bad, but we had some guys that got injured.
Wow.
And here we are trying to teach them jungle warfare.
Right.
And so that was like a sobering moment for me in that sense that, okay, these guys are literally going in there, pursuing the bad guys, getting in firefights with these guys in the jungle. So at that point, I started to be more inquisitive about, hey, what are you really doing? How's this working? Do the tactics work that we teach you? And come to find out, yes, like when they're setting up their linear ambushes, when they're patrolling to contact, when they're doing all that stuff, yeah, a lot of that stuff works, but they had subtleties that they changed, which was super valuable, because I can remember taking some of those subtleties and trying to incorporate them into our SOPs as a, proof of concept. Like, okay, we didn't discover this, but other people did. We should, we should be piping this into our feedback loop and taking advantage of it.
Yeah. Oh, that's
Didn't always
fascinating.
work.
That's fascinating. Yeah, I found the same thing in the Philippines when I was down there. They've been fighting an insurgency in the Southern Island chain for a long time, and I wasn't going to teach them anything about that. So I took on kind of the role of a student to the Filipino Marine generals. He was like the mentor, and I just learned, and we could help them with some technical stuff, intelligence type stuff, but the on the ground tactics and the human network, of course. I just learned a ton from doing it like that, not coming in like, here we are to teach you guys this. And no.
In my younger years, I had a chip on my shoulder, and I know that's guys that know me are like, no, but it took some maturing and actually seeing things like that to kind of wake me up in a sense that, hey, we're not the only ones that are out there doing this.
Yeah.
And, like if my directive is to do it at the very best level that I possibly can, then what are my resources? I have to have resources, not just that are presented to me in an FM or in a jungle warfare course that we set up. And I kind of started to look at training differently. I mean, I already was looking at training differently from my first experience, my first deployment, but even then I started to really look at it differently and like, where are some other reliable or valuable resources that we can go to kind of take away some of this stuff? And I mean, the combat swimmer program is a perfect example. The Europeans had a strong combat swimmer program that, through direct interaction and interoperability, we really kind of started to bring in. I can remember the first combat swimmer course that I went through, and then, flash forward like, 3-5 years later, and I'm like, we're diving through an underwater obstacle course, and we're having to do things with our mask taped over, and it's like,
that's East Coast right there. That's the direct connection with the comp swimmers. Yeah.
Yes, it was, but that's the kind of thing that really left an impression on me. It's like, okay, and I try to parlay this, I try to preach this to all the guys that I had contact with and influence in with, which is, hey man, everybody's a source. Everybody can give you something. It's how you interpret it or what value it brings to the equation. You are the one that needs to measure that. But look at everybody as a source. Look at everybody as a potential, training tip or some sort of advancement in your game moving forward. And it was something that luckily has stuck with me since then. Like, I really am like, where can I go to learn this? This is an area that I don't have a very strong skill set in. Where do I go to get better?
Man, that's amazing. So after all that experience, you did a little training cell on the East Coast, and did you know you were going to the West Coast to go to Buds and then get out from there? What was your plan? Going out to Buds?
It's kind of in my head. I knew that if I went to the West Coast, it was probably going to be the back into my career. And I say that only because I got a little burnt out there, towards the end of my East Coast time, and going to the West Coast kind of opened my eyes to some other things that might be important, family, my future, and I did a terrible job, absolutely horrendous job of professional development as far as rising in the ranks. I mean, I left as an E6, but at the time I spent the majority of my career as an E5. And, to me, that was like,
that's the best rank in the teams right there.
100%. You've got responsibilities that, are amazing, and you have capabilities to go with it. So it was really the best position. But my view on rank was I didn't appreciate it. It was a Master Chief, a Vietnam era frogman, as a matter of fact, that really kind of pounded this into my brain, which is, as you mature, your responsibilities to the team become different. You need to now give back to the team, and you need to now become a leader in that sense, and however you define leader. And that's because when I told him, when I was checking out at the team area, and you go through and you sign out at all the departments, he asked me where I was going, and I told him I'm going to Buds. And the reason why I went to Buds was also twofold. I was in a burnout period, so I was looking for something different. But a teammate had a really bad deal. He had a problem with his family, and the Navy was not looking kindly on that. So basically, he was getting orders to go to Buds, and the Navy was, going to uproot his family, and it was a really bad situation. So they told him, well, you can go unaccompanied then, which made that even worse.
Yeah.
So I ended up volunteering to take his orders to go out to Buds. Yeah. So, I wanted to change. I felt at that point I needed change to help me rewrite my brain, if you will. Buds. And I also kind of knew, okay, if I'm going out to Buds, this is probably going to be my last duty station of sorts. That I didn't want to go to Buds, but I looked at Buds as what it is, a schoolhouse.
Yeah.
It's not an operational duty station. It's a schoolhouse. And I just wanted to pull, I just wanted to be on the tip of the spear. I just wanted to pull triggers and be downrange. That's what I wanted. So I looked at it as almost like a demotion. Right. And kind of soured me a little bit. Yeah. And this, God bless him, Master Chief Steve Russell, he tuned me up. I mean, I was like, he got up from his desk. He got in my face. He was animated. And he basically explained to me, all the years that I'd been in the teams, all the experience I gained, everything that I had done, I owed it to the teams to share that information. And one of the best things to do that is to go to Buds as a Buds instructor. Oh, that's awesome. And I didn't appreciate it at the time. And even once I got there, I still had a sour taste in my mouth about it. But I just, it is what it is. I couldn't change that about me. It's like trying to blame a tiger for having stripes. It's just like that was who I was back then. But I had some great mentors that really kind of put me on the right track. And it became very important to me to fulfill the role that I was there for, which is a gatekeeper. And that became very apparent to me very quickly. Like, okay. And you have all these high aspirations about what you're going to do as a Buds instructor. And then you also get an exposure to the 1,000-foot view of what it really, what it really looks like, how many guys we actually have to get through the pipeline to the teams to maintain or attrition, to deal with all that stuff. There is a number that we have to reach every year in order to manage that. And I hadn't valued that. That was another thing that was very interesting to me, to see that kind of 1,000-foot view. You will always hear this come out of me, which is I never want to be at that command if they wanted to water down the standards. If they were going to try to, that was it. That was my line in the sand. Nope, not going to do it. That is the one thing that because living through that first deployment and being nonstop, literally. I mean, I think I might have gotten every now and then I'd get 1 or 2 hours of sleep. Somebody would wake me up. Hey, you're going to go and do this. Hey, you got to go escort this. Hey, you got to go retrieve that. And it's just nonstop for that. And that became so pivotal to me that I all of a sudden started to understand at a visceral level what Buds really was and the importance behind some of the things that we did in Buds. And so it was very interesting to go back as an instructor and see it. One of the actual phase officers was a warrant officer who was a chief when I went through Buds.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so that was actually really cool. I got a chance to kind of connect with him again from a different perspective.
Yeah.
And it was awesome because he could, like, when I would ask him, like, hey Mike, is that how we did it? Is that how you guys did it back then? He's like, no, we did it like this. Or yes, that's how we did it. Or, he would give me some really cool feedback about that. And I could, because he was there, I remember multiple times having to be he, back then he was part of second phase, which was land warfare. And even though he was the chief for the blue team, I was on my class went to the gold team. I still had a lot of interaction with him because, it's the phase, you see them all the time. So I remembered him very well. He was also hard to forget.
Yeah.
So that was interesting, but great time there at Buds. Once I kind of understood my mission, that was the thing too. It's like, maybe I just didn't appreciate the mission early on. And I was kind of being a little kind of like a stick in the mud of sorts, wasn't willing to move on, if you will. So that was good. And again, the mentors that I had there, guys like Andy Tafalski and Denny Chalker, they were the guys that really kind of like smacked me and put me in the right frame of mind. So couldn't ask for better guys.
Yeah, I remember both those guys. Denny Chalker was the mass chief when I went through. So were you already a gun guy at this point? Because my first memory of you, third phase instructor, by this point, third phase is the last phase and it's the land warfare phase. Yeah. And we're in that third phase classroom and you come in and we're about to go to, it's beginning of third phase. So we're about to go to that little indoor range somewhere. Maybe it was in North Island. I don't remember where it was exactly.
The Border Patrol range.
Okay, Border Patrol. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think it was because I can't conceptualize where it was. I got on a bus, I got off the bus, I walked in somewhere, and it was just like a FAM, right? It was just a FAM, and I think you could get your expert pistol rifle from there. Yeah. I think maybe it was pistol, I forget, but I know I left Buzz with both.
Of course.
But I trained beforehand. So I sought out, before the internet, I sought out Vietnam veterans that were in that training space, and really mentored me along, taught me how to shoot, but more importantly, taught me how to think logically, taught me how to think tactically, passed on lessons from Vietnam. So I was very fortunate to find these guys, and for me to be searching, and essentially, I think now looking back on it, for them to be looking for someone receptive to pass lessons on to. So it was incredible. But you walked in. And so I'd done a lot of shooting. Point being, I'd done a lot of shooting up to that point. I was about as prepared as you could possibly be for every part of Buds, I think. But you come in and there's a SIG, and you go through some basics probably. But the way you moved, to this day, I remember the way you moved with the pistol, and it was different from the way the other instructors moved with the pistol. And I was like, this is a gun guy. I'm sitting somewhere in that room like, this guy's a gun guy, even at that stage. Because people figure like everybody in the military, particularly special operations, are gun people, are gun guys. And that's not necessarily true. A lot of people, particularly officers, they might know the SIG, they might know the M4, they might have a FAM on a couple other things, but pretty much if it wasn't issued to them, and they really don't have an interest in it, or they don't like so. But I could tell the way you moved with the pistol that you were a gun guy. And
that's funny. That's actually pretty cool. Actually.
Yeah, the way you moved it in front of the class, like doing. I mean, I can remember to this day. It stood out. I couldn't tell you really any other instructors. I remember Andy Tafalski. I remember Danny Chalker, of course, because they were up there. But yeah, I remember you because of the way you moved with that pistol and just how comfortable you were with it, because I'd seen it in the Vietnam vets, and that's how I move with the pistol, because they passed that stuff on to me.
That is so cool.
So I remember that. But were you like? Did you already know your path, or what were you thinking about that time, or how did you become a gun guy, or more of a gun guy than the other people that didn't take an interest in it?
I mean, that's a great question. When you think about our mission, in the end, actions on the objective means that we're putting bullets in bad guys. So no matter what, we could be inserting, we could be fighting to the target, whatever we're doing, the ultimate objective is that we are there to, capture, kill the enemy. And the better I was at doing that, the better chances we had at mission success. And my first couple platoons, maybe even the first 3 platoons, I was very fortunate because I had a lot of other guys that had the same opinion. And so there was and you know this just as well as I do, what do you get when you get 2 frogmen in a room? You have a race, no matter what. It doesn't matter what it is. It's a race.
That competition.
So that's exactly it. There's this ingrained in our DNA that's going to drive you to want to just be better than the other guy. And so I was very fortunate that I had platoons that had a lot of those guys in it, particularly that did well on the shooting side. So we were constantly shooting, constantly training. This was also back in the day when there used to be an indoor range out there in Little Creek called Lynnhaven.
It was Lynnhaven Shooting Range? I think I remember.
Yeah. So we had a contract with them that we could just go there at any point in time and dump ammo, whatever. We'd go to the armory, get a 1,000 rounds of ammo in the can, take it over there and just spend the morning there all day long. That's what we did. We trained a lot.
Yeah.
And we had the outdoor place, which was Pungo, out in Pungo.
Yeah.
And we did
I lived out there. I lived right next to Pungo. Yeah. Pungo Pizza.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So
delicious.
we did that's where we did a lot of the rifle stuff. We did pistol work at Lynnhaven and we did all our rifle stuff out at Pungo. And you were, if you weren't doing something, find something to do. If you were looking for something to do, that we had this contract and I'm like, well, I'm going to go down. It wasn't too far from the team area too. It was straight down Independence Boulevard. And so we would just go down there. A couple of us would go down there maybe for the morning. And then it just depended. But I put a lot of time and energy into that aspect of it because that to me signified that's how I guess you could say that's how I felt we were measured. It's like, how well could you fight with your gun? Mm-hmm. If you could fight a gun, that was good. That meant that you were, where you needed to be. I had plenty of other areas that I needed to work on. But luckily, anything that had to do with the assaults was a strong suit for me. So I shot competition pretty much back then on the weekends when I could. I had guys, like I said, I'm not kidding. When the first kind of rental that I was in was this place right on Chicks Beach. And there were 4 of us because there was this little room in the back area that was converted to a bedroom that one of the other guys lived in. There were 3 bedrooms and then this makeshift bedroom that was converted. So there were 4 of us and we had this living room area. And I'm not kidding. When the commercial came on, all of our SIGs, personal owned SIGs were laying right there on the sofas. You just pick one up and you just start dry firing on the wall. There'd be targets or pictures or whatever. You just
I put those silhouettes on my wall too.
Yeah. And as soon as the program came back on, everybody put the SIGs back down and you just go back to watch. Literally we would do that. So that was my first 2 platoons was the first 2 platoons when I came back to Virginia Beach were like that. When I got to Buds, it was, being in third phase, obviously you are responsible for land warfare, which I believe, that's where you get your first exposure to tradecraft. And, we want the guys coming out of there, and in the end, one of the things that I was looking for in particular was, how safe were these guys? How well would they take instructions? How easily could I get them to shoot? Because, once they got to the team area, there's more filters obviously, but I wanted to make sure that guys that left Buds under my watch were good shooters. And I did the best that I could with those guys. And to this day, in fact, it's so funny. I got a call last night. I got to remember to call him back from another guy that was in Buds at the same time that I was an instructor there. But, really want to try to impart on everybody how important it was. In fact, what's so cool is there was a drill, the Navy Qual pre 9/11. Had a stage in it, and you probably remember it, where you fired 5 rounds standing, reload, 5 rounds kneeling, reload, 5 rounds prone.
I think that's what we did.
Yeah. Well, I put everybody through there, a modified version of that.
Okay.
Because I felt like that was a great assessment tool.
Yeah.
We use that drill. That is a drill that we use in our rifle classes to this day.
Oh, nice.
We call it a modified Navy Qual.
Yeah.
And not a lot of people know where it comes from, but it came from third phase out on the island, putting the Bud students through some like I, put them through a little extra stuff. I mean, it was part of the qual, but we just kind of worked it a little bit differently. We worked it with a little bit more kind of like, more of a practical side to it. Hey, listen, this is, this has value. You got a lot of moving parts. You got positions, you got reloads, you got to be able to put your targets down. So I love that drill as a result of that. And it is probably one of my favorite rifle drills to not just shoot myself, but for, the students to come through our classes now to have a shot at and, kind of see where they rank, stack up. The guys back then were burning it down. I mean, by the time you're done with, your trip out to the island, and the guys that were good, you could see how good they were by watching them run that drill.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That was fantastic, guys. I felt comfortable, in third phase because that stuff wasn't new necessarily to me. Land nav. I love the land nav. I ran that course. I think I was the first or second guy done. But it was fantastic. I loved all third phase was just good. Like how are you supposed to do a rebreather before you get to buds?
Right.
Not much you can do. You can be comfortable in the water with, swimming and water polo and scuba diving and free diving or whatever else. You can get comfortable in the water that way. But then it's a different deal when you're in buds. But land warfare, if you're comfortable with weapons already, you're comfortable with all the safety aspects. The demo is new, obviously. But, it's following instructions and protocols and that sort of a thing.
Man, I love demo.
Yeah, and it was so cool in third phase being able to do essentially what World War II frogmen did out on the island. Breath holds, go down. One guy's up here watching, hacking some breath, switching places, like getting it done. That was with obstacles that look exactly like the ones that were in World War II movies growing up. But I loved all that. When I met you, I want to say it was August or September of 1997.
Wow.
I think is when that was.
That was, so I was there. I was at Buds. I had a year, a little bit over a year under my belt by the time that meeting occurred, which was good because the first year you're trying to figure it out. And one of the things that I really am very grateful for, Buds taught me another thing, which was documentation, paperwork. I was the phase student control. So every phase has a student controller who's responsible for all the record keeping, because that's if there's a student who is potentially not a good candidate for the teams, unless it's a blatant issue, only way that we really have to out process him is to present paperwork. Basically, especially
by third phase, after they've been through first, they've been through second. Now they're like,
yes, exactly. It's a paper trail basically. But I took it very seriously. Like virtually any student that I took to the director of training as a candidate to be dismissed. I mean, with one or two exceptions, just because the paperwork was so dialed in. Like the standards of performance were all so well documented. You were either a performance drop, a med drop, or academic drop, or then when you got to third phase, safety.
Yeah. I think we lost a guy at the island for safety. He probably should have been gone along the way, but he kept getting a bunch of different chances, And then third phase, I forget the guy's name. I can picture maybe a blonde kid. But yeah, like third phase, like at the island, but that's your last chance. Like if this guy is still unsafe with demo and with firearms at this point, like this is the last gate. It's so true.
Away. Like, and being able to keep those documents in order, because I'm not saying that there was pushback, but if the paperwork wasn't in order, if the numbers were off, then that would be grounds for a potential, denial, if you will. Yeah. So if the numbers were fine, then we're good. But if we had a hell week that we lost more than normal, or a pool comp that we lost more, then potentially if the paperwork wasn't on point, it could be all right. We'll just retread them. We'll do it again. Kind of thing. So I was and that's one thing that I took with me once I left the Navy is, the standards. And it's funny because I don't recall the standards being shoved down my throat so much operationally, because you're always trying to work hard. You're always working hard. You're always trying to, you're competitive. You want to be the best. You don't want to be the weak link in the chain.
Yeah.
So the standards are they're there, but you're always kind of like, you're just performing above them. So they don't really, become,
They're not on your
you're not-
radar,
you-
really. You're just
exactly
earning your Trident every day.
Yeah, exactly. So when you get to buds and now you're looking at it from this different lens, that became something that I carry with me to this day. So, whenever we're training in the current world, we have a very high level of standards that we expect our students to make. It is known, it's like a reputation that people know of us now, that some people will avoid coming to train with us because they're concerned they may not meet the standards and they're afraid they're going to fail, which is fine. I mean, we see that. It kind of defeats the purpose. That's you're trying to. I always tell people you want to fail fast and fail often. The faster you fail and the faster you learn from your failures, the faster you're going to build your talent, build your skill, build your performance. So don't be afraid to fail unless it's a major issue. But it's interesting because the outside world, when I got into the outside world.
Yeah. When did you leave?
Man,
what was your year did you get out?
I left in 99.
Okay.
I left in 99. And the job that I was going to do didn't pan out.
What was it?
And it was working for a training company, and it sounded good on paper, but it just didn't materialize. As much as we wanted it to work, it just wasn't going to work. So, and I tell this story about, I was committed to being successful just as successful as I was in the Navy. I was committed to being successful in the outside world.
Yeah.
I didn't want to go back to the Navy. I didn't want to go back to the Navy because I felt if I went back to the Navy, it would mean that I was a failure in the real world, in the outside world. And maybe not the best thinking on my part. I can remember Captain McGuire from the center there. When I'm checking out, he's the last guy on the list. He was really adamant about me at least staying in the reserves. And I was like, nope. If there's any link back to the Navy, then I'll be potentially, if I run into any hardships, I'll be tempted to want to just take the easy, because now it's a family issue. And so I said no to everything, and part of that was also me being stubborn, not thinking things through. I should have probably done the reserve time and finished off with a full retirement. After I left the Navy and that first job didn't pan out, I got recruited to start doing work overseas back in kind of like a low vis mode again. And it was it was working with the State Department, and it was basically doing work for the embassies and the ambassadors' residence overseas. But it was a good transition for me because it had some sort of kind of operational framework to it. We're going into some areas are not good areas. I went to some pretty bad areas in that time period. So I kind of that was a good transition for me. That helped me to make that transition to the civilian world a little bit easier because I was basically deploying. I would go 30 to 45 days at a time, come back, 30, 45 days off, 30, 45, then I'd rotate back out there. We'd hit 4 or 5 countries each trip. So, it was very familiar for me in what I had been doing in the Navy. So it was an easy transition.
How long did you do that for?
I want to think a couple years. Okay. And in that time period, it's funny too, because in that time period is when I wrote my first book. And the irony of that first book, I love to tell this story, is I think you can.
How do I not have this first book? I didn't know this first book.
It's out of print right now.
That's
because
why.
I put all my efforts into the new book.
Yeah.
But I will get you a copy.
Well, thank you.
The funny thing about that is when I left the Navy, one of the things that I did was I went and interviewed for the State Department's DSS, the Directorate of
Diplomatic Security Service.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I just got done watching Chernobyl, so that's where directorate came from.
Okay, got it. Yeah.
So, and I went to interview, and everything was going good until I got to the essay. So there's an essay that you have to do. I went to, while I was there at Buds, I went to college. So I thought I was good. I went and I did this essay, and basically you get a report that you basically are briefed on, and I shouldn't say a report. You get an incident that you have to then write a report on.
Okay.
And it's in an essay format. And so I thought I did a good job. I'm thinking, oh man, I know how to do this.
Yeah.
Okay, let's make sure that we structure everything correctly and everything looks good. And maybe some grammar issues are there, but okay, no big deal. And I get called back into the office, and the guy there goes, well, there's no question that you have the hard skills that we're looking for, but your soft skills are a little lacking. And I was like, what? And he's like, yeah, your writing skills are not where they need to be. So what we're going to ask you to do is maybe you could take some college level courses and come back and retest and maybe do better that time. And in my head, I'm thinking, I'm just nodding my head. And in my head, I'm like, dude, I'm never coming back.
Yeah.
I'm never coming back here. And so the very first copy, I kept that guy's card. So the very first book that I pulled out of the case, sent it right to him with a note, handwritten note. Hey, thanks for the kind words. I took your advice and I wrote a book instead. Wow. So that was kind of fun. I enjoyed that. But yeah, so on one of these deployments, I eventually moved up to like a team leader spot, and I was doing the advanced work. So I would go and set up all the stuff for the guys that would come in. And when I was on that team lead, I had a lot of time to myself. Like I would go in, meet with the the ambassador team, the embassy team, get everything set up so that when the regular team came in, they would just do a handoff and move. I would leapfrog to the next country. They would follow me a couple days later, kind of thing. So I would have about 2 or 3 days where I wouldn't have any obligations. If I got everything done, and after a while, I kind of figured out how to do this really smooth and efficiently, so I wasn't wasting a lot of time. And when I would have those downtimes, I would write. I would just write on. I had this like old laptop that I would just write on, and it took me, I think, 3 trips to get the rough draft done. Wow. But I got it done in like each trip might have been 4 or 5 weeks. So it took me like about 3, maybe 4 months to get the actual full manuscript. And why I wrote the book was because what I saw in the industry at the time, when I left the Navy again, I was in a little bit of a, whoa, this is not what I was expecting. I expected everybody wanted to train. I expected everybody wanted to improve and get better. And so obviously, if it's a value, it's got to be measured. And if it's measured, it's got to be viewable, it's got to be observable. And if it's observable, we also have to make it repeatable. And that's what standards are. And not a lot of people like that idea in the beginning. And some of the stuff that I saw was somewhat diametrically opposed to what I did in the Navy and what we were doing in the Navy. So I felt like the best way to address that was to put it in a book and kind of like share that with the public, with the population. And it was a huge success. It did really, really well. I mean, I self-published it, and I did this at the same time that I was deploying overseas. We had our first kid, which was a preemie baby. So, I mean, we pretty much took on every life challenge you could possibly take on after I left the Navy. We moved out of the state to a new residence. We got married. We had our first kid, started a new job. I mean, all in like 6 months time period. So yeah, it was very, very compressed.
Yeah. That's amazing. Was it Trident Concepts right out of the gate, or would it?
It was.
Well, you've been doing that for this is a long time then.
Actually, this is March 2023 is officially our 20-year anniversary.
Wow. Congratulations.
Yeah.
That's
Thank
awesome.
you. We just, I can't believe it. It's so hard to believe that it's been 20 years that we've been doing this. And, I'm very grateful. We've had so very fortunate to have done and accomplished what I've done. And I wouldn't be here if it weren't for some of the mentoring that I got in the Navy and trying to take that information and share it with the public. And, sometimes, different strokes for different folks. Some people are more interested in other approaches towards training. Our approach is, tried, true, proven in combat. It works. It's just not easy. And that's the hard part, is that you got to put the work in.
Interesting. How's it changed? How's the industry changed over time? That's a 20-year run with the same company that you started. There's not too many people in that boat.
There's really there's that are not a fixed location.
Yeah, right.
That are not a fixed location. There's really the only other one I can think of, and I'm not entirely sure when he started, is Paul Howe.
Okay.
Another great dude. In fact, Paul was in Panama as well.
Oh, wow.
So that's where I first kind of got to, and I know Paul. I remember him. He doesn't remember me, but back then, I mean, he just had this look, this look. You're like, all right, that is a badass right there.
Yeah.
I love Paul to death. Hopefully he'll hear this. He's such a great dude, but he also had a similar approach as far as standards were concerned, which makes sense coming from that unit.
Did you notice it got more crowded over time? Like,
oh my God, dude. It is.
Did it start slow at first? Like guys coming back from GWAT type stuff? Or was it like, hey, 2010, like, wow, everybody's getting out and everybody wants to be a firearms instructor or trainer, start a school. They're all reaching out. Probably the same way people reach out to me asking about writing books. I bet people reach out to you and say, hey, I'm getting out. I want to start a training company.
For sure.
What do you suggest?
I tell people, first of all, don't get out if you don't have to. I mean, if it's really that, if you're hating life, that's one thing. But actually, that's a great question because I feel like it was when the private contracting really took off. When guys could leave the Navy or leave whatever service branch they were in and go and make, at the time, because I did that. I was a plank owner with Blackwater.
Okay.
And, I was making daily rates that were crazy. I mean, just out of just phenomenal. So that became very alluring to guys because you were like literally in those early days, it was cowboyish, very cowboyish, but you were getting paid pretty good. So I think during that time period, guys would leave the military, go and do that private contracting. And some guys would just turn it into a lifestyle. They would just, they would actually, instead of coming back to the States, they would have an apartment they'd share with guys in Western Europe someplace, and they would just bounce back and forth doing the private contracting. Other guys would rotate all the way back to the States. And I think at some point when, so many companies started throwing up a shingle for private contracting overseas, it started to get diluted. I mean, that's ultimately why I stopped doing it, was because I was looking over my shoulder more than I was looking in front of me. And that to me, you're already thin. I mean, you're anorexic thin as you're doing that job. It's a little bit different. It's so much different than having, an actual support system in place. Like I'm going over and I'm bartering with logs of Copenhagen for QRF. Like, hey man, if we get your call signs and we're in a pickle, can we call you? Here's a log of Copenhagen. Would you, would you be willing to be?
People are like, what log of Copenhagen? It's very valuable overseas for those.
Very valuable. I never dipped in the teams, so I always had Copenhagen because of its value, because of how much I could barter with it. Like
the old barter system,
dude. It was. I would go over to Bagram, and I would trade cans of Copenhagen for gun parts so that we can keep our guns up and running. Like, no shit. Yeah. Like we'd have to get spare parts because that's the kind of thing that in the early stages of private contracting we didn't have. We didn't have armorers that could keep our guns up. And luckily, most of us were from that time period that we did all of our own maintenance. We did all of our own stuff, but we didn't have parts. So we didn't have any way of actually, getting guns back online when we needed them. And so I bartered the shit out of stuff. I would take like 2 or 3 logs of Copenhagen and guys would be like, hey man, how much? I'm like, well, this is if we need, like, what if I need to go and get, some jerry cans for fuel? What if I need to do that so that we can do some long range stuff? What, like we need to be thinking about like long-term stuff if we're going to be on our own here. So I would eventually kind of give in, and towards the end of my rotation, I'd start just giving cans out, but I would usually hold on to them until the very end, just because you just never knew. You never knew what you would need, man. I bartered for some crazy shit. Shower curtains. Yeah. We got some shower curtains with cans of Copenhagen. So, so when the private contracting really started to change, and you weren't making, depending on your position, you could be making sometimes I never knew guys that actually made $2,000 a day, but you heard rumors of guys that were out there doing that. It was more realistic to see guys at 1,000 to maybe 1,200, depending on your position.
Yeah,
and everybody else was
pilot
less
contractors could make that, and some terps at a certain point in time could make that. The pay scale started to drop. And as the pay scale started to drop, guys started looking for other things. So that's where you started to see a lot more people moving into the training space, looking for, potential vocation, potential occupation. And some guys were successful at it. Some guys not so much. But it certainly has changed. I would say for the better. Anytime you've got guys that are downrange, that are developing new TTPs and are willing to share that with
the masses, if you will. I feel like that's a good thing. It's not always applicable to everybody. A private citizen probably doesn't know or doesn't need to know some of the stuff that we did, but in some cases, others, law enforcement, and even some of the other branches, are probably in need of that stuff. I mean, during the early stages of the GWAT, we did so many classes, so many, rifle-based classes, a few pistol-based classes, but mainly it was rifle-based classes, some tactics stuff, and it just was nonstop. I mean, for like 6-7 years, it was. Yeah. I mean, I was on the road sometimes in those years, maybe like 220 plus.
Wow.
I can remember a couple years that, it was like, I'd come home, leave again, come home, leave again, come home. There was sometimes it was getting to the point where I was getting a little burnout on that.
Yeah.
But things were also changing in the industry. I feel like where we're at in this industry right now is a very interesting time period. We have so many new gun owners as a result of a lot of things, the pandemic, the craziness that happened as a result of that, just that really drove up gun sales and new gun owners in particular. So it's an interesting new landscape. And I think the difference is that some training organizations or training individuals are having a hard time adapting to the new landscape. And what I mean by that is, the new student is more of a first-time gun owner, and their skill level is at the beginner level, maybe basic level, and a lot of these other guys that cut their teeth kind of during the time period that I did, they're still wanting to work with the intermediate, advanced, elite level guys, which is great. I mean, I still love going out there and throwing down with them, but those guys are talent, instructors. And my concern is that I want my talent in front of the new gun owner. I want the new gun owner to get that exposure to what talent really looks like, as far as an instructor and a skilled gun fighter, whatever that might be. And, I feel like not enough of those guys are actually doing classes at that beginner basic level to help these new gun owners have an appreciation for what that looks like, because people can recognize talent. People can see talent. Like in the classroom, what you saw when you described your first exposure to me, people can recognize talent. And I feel like we as an industry, the 2A industry, need to be putting our best talent in front of the new masses of people that are coming in there and get them not just interested in education and training, but get them to understand the importance behind their freedoms, their liberty, their constitutional rights to be armed, get them to become advocates for these rights. The new era of activism is these new gun owners, and trying to get them to appreciate that these, this has been, as long as I've been doing this, it's the Second Amendment has been under attack. For as long as I can remember, it's been under attack, and it will always be under attack. So I have found myself in a position now where I'm more interested in longevity and trying to ensure that the same freedoms that you and I grew up with are in place for our children, our grandchildren, all future generations have that. As and I think Reagan said it, where democracy is one generation away from extinction. Yep. So we really have to work at trying to get more people to appreciate and understand what it means to be free, and how to ensure and safeguard that freedom. It's not a pen and paper. Unfortunately, it's a sword and shield, and that's the hard part, is to try to help people to understand that.
Yeah. And you're doing that now with the podcast. So what are you doing? How have you made things a little more sane in your travel schedule, or are you still running around doing that? What does that look like? And what are the people can go to the website, go to TridentConcepts.com and see it all. But from your perspective, do you have anybody else do you have a cadre of instructors, or is it just you, or what does it look like?
So over the years, we've kind of fluctuated. I've had as big a staff as about 12, 13 guys on staff at one point.
It's a lot.
Yeah, that was during the GWA. We had we had a lot of contracts with a lot of units and organizations, so I needed great people to help me, and they all were awesome. And now I've kind of petered down to just 2 or 3 guys that I can call in to either assist or just hand the torch over to them and have them run it for me. But yeah, now I've kind of found myself in a new space, which is the podcasting space. And at first I wasn't sure what to think of it.
Yeah.
And because I have no other than being a guest, as in this case, that's the only experience that I had, but being the host is like, wow, so much more. It's so different, but I've really enjoyed it.
Nice.
I can, and I know that you can appreciate this because a lot of what you're doing is, research and talking points and how to keep the flow going and how to kind of engage with the audience in a manner that, you're able to pull the guest what the audience is hoping to hear.
Yeah.
So that's been a lot of fun, not without its challenges. But my surprise is how much I actually enjoy it.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
How long have you been doing it? Is it a year?
Not even that much.
Okay.
I mean, well, technically, yeah, we officially started, we recorded our first podcast in June of last year.
Okay.
And so, we wanted to start sooner, but building out the studio just took longer. And everything's moving so much slower. And, the guests, we've had some phenomenal guests that has just been, I'm so grateful to have had so many amazing people come on the show. I'm going to twist your arm and somehow blackmail you into getting you to come down here.
Oh, absolutely.
Do a podcast in studio kind of thing. I mean, the other thing too, is like, I love doing the in-studio format as well. Yeah. There's just it's a unique experience where you're right across from that person. The connection, the camaraderie, all of that is just so much more palatable. It's like you can feel it the viewers can feel it of sorts. So that's been a lot of fun.
That's awesome. And people can go to your website and click on it and go to Apple Podcasts and Spotify and YouTube and all the rest of it.
I don't actually have a link on my website. It's got its own website. Bulletproofworkshop.com is that website. And, they can, on social media, they can go to my links or go to my, whatever it's called, the descriptions there, and they can see links to the podcast and stuff like that. So it's kind of a, I'm still figuring that all out, the social media stuff.
It's a battle space. Just got to look at it like the battle space.
That's a great way of putting it, because I will tell you straight up, man. And, like my period in the teams was one where, we didn't share, we didn't talk outside the community, like no interviews, none of that. And that was kind of like embedded in me. So when I come out in this space and now I have to, right. It's such a hard thing. It's it took me a while. At first I refused, like I wasn't on a lot of the social media platforms initially. And to my, unfortunate demise of sorts, as far as being able to stay relevant in that space, I started so late that all these other peers of mine are so much more advanced in that sense, and on the social media sphere. So that is a mistake that I made. I kind of pushed back from the social media stuff, and I realize now that it wasn't the right thing to do.
Yeah, no, I had the same kind of thing. Like I never had a Facebook, I never had Instagram, never had any of that stuff in the SEAL teams, because I thought nothing good can come of it. And it's interesting today that if you're doing stuff more in a low vis environment, you're doing some more agency type work. Now it's odd not to have a social media profile. So really? Now it's like, because imagine the red flag, let's say in 2009, is someone who has a social media thing, who has a picture that links to somebody back to this. And all of a sudden, wait a sec. Okay. Now you add facial recognition technology to this, and not only alias passports or whatever else we're doing intel work, but all the pictures that are out there now that can be sorted through so quickly. Now you have to figure that piece out. So anyway, so 2009, I thought nothing could come of it. Now, if you're sending somebody to do some type of work in a country on alias or not, but the red flag is no social media presence, no business, nothing that's
that's
searchable.
a good point.
Why can't I find anything about you online? I should be able to find something about you. You're of the age where you're going to have something. Like we could still maybe get away with it. Like we just didn't, if we're doing that sort of thing, like, hey, I don't do any of that stuff. But somebody younger, 20 years younger than us that's coming into this, the intel field or the military or whatever else.
That way.
It's interesting. I think about it in terms now, as I'm writing thrillers, I think about how to solve these problems, but they're real problems for people that are going out there, doing the work. But yeah, the same thing. So I had to figure it out as I was getting out. I kind of knew that I was going to have some sort of a profile. So I embraced it, but I looked at it for a long time. I looked at Instagram for a solid year before I created an actual account that I was going to use, but just studied it. And I looked at it kind of as, if I owned a general store in small town USA, and I have my general store, my name's on the outside or the name of the store's on the outside, and somebody walks by that store, that's somebody going by on Instagram. That's so the person walking by. And if they want to come in and click on a photo, that's somebody coming into my general store. And maybe they're like, hey, do you know directions to the lake or back to the interstate or whatever else? And you want to help that person, and maybe they buy a 6-pack or some gum or whatever. And then some people come in because that's their place to go and buy food because they live in that small town or whatever it might be. So I looked at it like that, and then that's kind of how I've tried to keep it. But more and more customers are coming. It gets harder to talk to everybody. But that's kind of how I looked at it.
That's the gate. That's a real thing for you. I can imagine. I like that viewpoint. That's a great way to kind of look at social media in this day and age. And I have changed my perspective. I am now trying to play that game of catch up and trying to do things a little differently. But I like that helps to really affirm the importance behind social media in this day and age and why you should probably do it. And to be honest, that was a great point about, hey, if you don't have a social media account, that's probably
in intelligence circles, and that's a red flag
point
these days.
I like that.
But yeah, it's interesting to think about anyway. But so and you're also adding value throughout the year, like you're through your podcast, through your social media posts, adding value to people's lives. They're choosing to spend time with you. That's time they're never going to get back. So that's kind of how I look at it too. Man. I want to always add value to people's lives because they're trusting me with that time, whether they buy the book or read one social media post or read a blog on my website or listen to this podcast. I want to add value to their lives because they're trusting me with that time they're never going to get back. So I think I take that very seriously.
I think, and I'll tell you, I came to that realization, fortunately, very early in my career post-Navy, that people were volunteering to come and train with me. And I've always taken that very seriously because they can't get that time back. That's the most valuable commodity that we currently possess, is the time. And so my perspective on that is that, they become part of our family of sorts. We students that have come through training classes are alumni, and that's how we treat them. We're very, I am where I am because of my experience in the Navy, but because of the trust that I have in this industry with people that are willing to come and train with me. And that was something that, I feel like some of the earlier trainers didn't appreciate per se. It's like, you are a badass in your own right, and people should take advantage of your experience, your knowledge, but you also have to put it in perspective that this is something that somebody is taking time off work. They're going to be away from their family. They're paying out of their own pocket. It's not the same as, in the teams of just going to a school. It's like, that's my job. My job is to go and learn how to be a more lethal warfighter. I'm going to go and do whatever it is to do that. In this case, the individual, the student, the customer, the client, however you want to look at it, is trusting me with that, and I take it very seriously. And that's one of the reasons why I'm so grateful that I continue to have these standards in place, because I can then ensure that I give them the very best at all times. Everything, is done to the highest standard that we can possibly do on our end.
Yeah.
I'm still holding myself to a high standard. And I do that because I am blessed by having students come to the training classes and trust us with their money, their time, and in some cases, the skills that they're learning could save their lives, could save their families' lives. And it's a very humbling experience. At this point, there's the glamour part of this job, right? Which is, it's great. I love to interact with people. I meet so many new people, amazing people. It's a huge perk, but there's also a dark side to this industry. And we saw it in the teams where during training, we would lose guys in training accidents. You're pushing the threshold, you're training hard, and you lose guys in training accidents. And then we also have guys that we lose downrange that don't make it back from their deployments. So I've had in my career, I've had students that didn't make it back from their gunfight that they had as a private citizen. And I've had 3 law enforcement officers that didn't survive their gunfights that have come through that came through multiple. Well, 2 of them had been through multiple classes. And I've had 4 students who also didn't survive their incident. Sure. So it's very humbling whenever I'm on the firing line. My job is to try to do the absolute best, knowing that whatever I'm teaching may be the difference between life or death for the student, for the customer that's on the firing line.
Yeah, man. So you're out there training. You have the podcast and you have the book out, and the book came out. Was it last year and a half?
It's been almost a year and a half.
Awesome.
I can't believe it, but it's been doing great. I'm so I really the first book. Obviously, I didn't know what I was doing. Not that I knew what I'm doing with the second book, but it came out. I'm very proud of how it came out because we put a lot of good work into it. I like how it flows. It's designed to engage the new gun owner. The new gun owner that wants to consider carrying concealed for their own protection. And I think it does an amazing job. There's several other ones that are out there, and some of them are good, but I'm partial obviously because it is my manuscript, but I'm very happy with how it addresses the new shooter. Yeah. I think it's the best book that that kind of tackles that new demographic, which is the new gun owner, the new concealed carrier.
Nice.
Yeah.
Awesome. And all that stuff will be in the show notes. People will say, why didn't you ask him what he carries? So what are you carrying? What are you carrying these days? What's your go-to?
Well, I'm a huge fan of the SIG product line, as
nice
folks might know. I started carrying, currently I've been working with the micro compacts, the 365s, and I love them. Yeah. They have they are the heavy lifters. In fact, I teach classes with them now as my primary carry gun. And I am so happy with the 365 line. And I've got pretty much every permutation that they've produced at this point.
I got one right here. Got one right here on my side. I'm fortunate to have quite a few different variations of the 365, but
I'm a huge fan of that blaster. It's been, and it's funny too, because, at the time before the pandemic, I was carrying a 320 compact, and I really liked that gun. That gun I thought was, it was comparable in every measure to the Glock 19, which was in a sense the de facto carry gun that everybody was bringing to classes. And then the pandemic hit, and everybody's lives changed. And for my own sanity, what I did was every month I picked a different gun to carry.
Nice.
And I created a little pro dev. And I started, I would train up on it before I'd carry it, and then I would get some competency skill level back up to, in case I had to use it. And I went through my inventory, and I went through and I started carrying a lot of, I went back, I carried 1911 for a month. I carried a 6-shot revolver for a month. I carried the 226 for a month, which I loved. And I had a 365 in my safe, but I just was like, I wouldn't say a bad taste in my mouth, but I had.
You're like, why carry that when I can carry something bigger?
Exactly, but it was also like, well, this gun is it's inadequate. It's not. It doesn't meet the same criterion that this other gun carries. But when I eventually took that gun and put it into the rotation of a carry gun for that 30-day period, or one of those 30-day periods, I was like, oh my God, this thing is why am I carrying that bigger?
Yeah.
This thing is so much, because you're in Utah, I'm here in Texas. Summers in Texas can get a little spicy. So having a small, lightweight, capable carry gun, I was like, all right, that's it. So I went to carrying the 365 almost full time after that little like experience or experiment, I guess is the best way to say it. So yeah, it's been a lot of the folks that are coming into the market are looking for a really good carry gun, and they think small, and they're not wrong. I mean, small is good. The biggest barrier to entry a lot of times is people feeling that they can't carry it because it's too big.
Yeah.
And so if they downsize a little bit, all of a sudden they're carrying it, which is the ultimate goal.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
Yep. No, I got that 365 right here. Got the little SnakeStaff Systems tourniquet over here. It's like a small, it's like a compact, tourniquet. So I've carried it since they sent me that thing a few months ago. I've carried it every day. I've never been without it. So yeah, I love it right here. But it's, so I carry those for sure. What's, I don't know if you've seen these things yet. SnakeStaff Systems right here. It's like they say to think of it as a subcompact pistol or subcompact pistol mag. So
dude, I have to totally look them up.
Yeah. It's I have the bigger ones. They're scattered there in cars and drawers. They're all over the place. But the one that's always on me and I just found this very easy to carry. So if I'm grabbing my wallet and my phone and my pistol, this is coming with me.
That's cool.
And my rule for my pistol is that usually I just carry it around here anyway. But if my phone's going with me somewhere, my pistol's going. That's just in my head. It's just like a little rule,
That's a great way to look at it.
To make me not lazy, to not be like, oh, I'm just running, there.
An errand to the gas station.
I'm just going, there. Would I take my phone? Yeah. Am I taking my phone? Yeah. Well, guess what else is coming with me? The blaster.
I like that. That's a good little helper, if you will. Because one of the problems that we have with the newer folks in the concealed carry market is, they unfortunately, to get to a point where you feel comfortable, you have to carry more.
You just gotta part of your life.
You have to increase the frequency. As you carry more and more and more, your confidence improves, and once your confidence improves, your comfort level gets higher. And then it becomes just like you said, it becomes just a daily part of your life. It's just something I'm going to grab my phone, I'm going to grab my blaster at the same time. And I love how you call it a blaster too, because that's my code word for it as well. Let me grab my blaster. Yeah. So everybody around the house, of course, knows what that means. I'm sure everybody now listening to the podcast will know what that means. It's not like you couldn't figure it out, but but still, I like the fact that you use that term too. Yeah. That's kind of cool.
Yeah. I always thought it was my responsibility also, as a citizen to do that, and to myself because of this gift of life that I was given, and then also 100%. To those for my family and those around me. So it's so anyway, that thing's always with me. But what are you carrying? What holster are you using these days?
So I use a Tolster, IWB holster. I found those guys. Well, one of the problems with the 365 was, I was trying to find a decent holster and trying to find one. Like I was so used to, like the more popular at the time, the more popular guns like the Glock 19s, the P3, the P320 compacts. You had every permeation of holster you could possibly imagine for those guns. But as the 365 first came out in the market, there wasn't that many. So I shopped around. I played with a couple that I, were betweens until I could find a better one. And I've been very happy with the Tolster holster. It's done everything that I needed to do. It's super easy, super clean, very small, minimal footprint, and I, the gun is already small enough. It's already small, so I wanted a holster with a low signature as well. Yeah. And for me, I carry just about every day of my life, so it's almost an appendage at this point. But I still want it to be comfortable. And that's one of the holsters that I found to be surprisingly comfortable.
Nice.
And some of the others that I played with.
Yeah. I went with BlackPoint Tactical. I found them in, I think, 2016. So that's a long time. I've been using their holsters now. Nice. So yeah, BlackPoint Tactical Mini Wing. But I have a bunch of other their stuff as well. But the Mini Wing seems to be my go-to.
I have one of theirs. They were one of the first ones to come out with a holster for the 365. I liked it. I was looking. The other thing too is that now I run a mini red dot on my carry gun, and that kind of changed the need or requirement for my holster. So that's where Tolster really kind of came into their own. They really produced a nice very, like I said, small, that would accommodate that mini red dot.
Nice. Yeah, I love that because I have the red dot. There's one on red dot on that one, 365 right there. So I love about these ones also is that it says on the back, because I'm sure you have, like I do, drawers and boxes full of holsters. And so I love that it says it clearly on there. It says, the 365, whatever, with red dot, it lets me know what's it. So I'm not like, what is it, trying to fit one in there and be like, dang it, it's not the right one. It's not trying all these different ones. It says right on there. So if I'm using something that's a little different, that's a smart thing. I grab a 320. I'm like, the AXG Scorpion. Okay, well, this one's just. There's one that says AXG Scorpion on it, and that's the one. Or I probably have multiple for that. But
I got lucky too because the Tolster holster that I have will accommodate just about every permeation of 365. Oh, nice. So whether I'm running with a red dot or not, whether I've got the XL model or just the standard base 365, it accommodates all of them. And I have kind of like, I'll show it to you maybe the next time I see you. I have a sort of a hybrid model that I'm carrying right now, and they've asked me to kind of keep it close for now. Nice. But I really like it. It's awesome. The best of both worlds. It's the best of all the worlds that I would want. So
love it. What belt are you running?
That changes every day almost. Yeah. I feel like I've kind of got a bit of nostalgia going on right now.
You go leather. You got to let your own leather.
Yeah, almost. I've got a old style riggers belt, an old style instructor belt.
Oh, no way.
Yeah. So I run that. I've got that. I'll run that.
Is it one that you made back in the day? Because we used to.
Oh God, no.
We used to have to make them back in the day. In the 90s, you had to make.
No. That would be cool if I don't even think. What's funny? I do have one of my original leather gun belts.
Nice. That they issued?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, it's an Ernie Hill speed leather one.
Has like the pattern on it? Like everybody knew like this guy's carrying. Like
oh yeah. It's so true. It is. And when I look at the circumference of that belt, there's no way I can put that on me right now. No way. Man. It's so small. But I love it. It's still in my closet. I carry it, or I don't carry it, but I have it there. Just because as a reminder, that's like OG. That is way OG.
Yeah.
I love that. But I'll carry, there's a other company called Liger Belt, which is a polyurethane belt. It's comfortable. I like it. I do have plenty of leather belts. But these days, it's in the Texas summer heats, I try to go with something that's kind of thin and lightweight, that doesn't have a heavy signature of sorts. It also depends on what I'm wearing. That's one of the things that we do really well is, we've had to do a lot of like low vis or off duty work. And so it's not always, like a comfortable, like casual wear. Sometimes it's business attire. Sometimes it's formal wear. Sometimes it's, unique kind of uniforms that are their uniforms that they have to wear. So it changes. But for the most part, my go-to would probably be like one of those original riggers belt or the Liger belt. Those are like the two most common ones that I grab these days. Nice. And it's funny too, because I just kind of like reach into the closet. I've got a little thingy where all my belts hang, and I'll just reach in there and grab one, whatever. It's like, oh, okay, today I'm going to wear this one.
Yep. No, I think we have the same type of setup. Typically, I'm grabbing the Dynamis belt, and usually I was going with because I came up in a time. Also, those Vietnam guys, it was all very thick leather because you're carrying typically a 1911 because that's what those guys carried. But even with even with that something else, it was just natural to have a leather belt, especially with leather holsters back then. Yeah. But then when I switched over to this Dynamis, I was like, it's gonna be too lightweight, but not so much. It works. I've been wearing that thing probably since 2017, I think. So. Long time, and I love it. It's nice and lightweight and has some other little things in it as well, like a little handcuff key and a couple other things in there.
Nice.
But can turn it into a sap if you need to. It's pretty sick.
Cool.
Some coins in there. But anyways, I've been using that for a while. But
nice.
Everybody's gonna find their own kind of mixture of stuff that works for them that they like, and that's part of the fun of it.
That's that. I was gonna say, a lot of times people get. They get a little butt hurt because maybe they read a review or their favorite, Instagram celebrity is wearing this, and then it doesn't work for them, or it just doesn't, they don't like it.
Right.
And I tell people, I'm like, hey, this is going to be a lifelong journey. You're going to have
that drawer full of holsters. You're going to have all those belts that we just talked about.
Yes.
And the more pistols that you get, the more belts and the more holsters that you will have.
Oh my goodness. So I just tell people, I'm like, hey, embrace it. Think of it as an opportunity. Like, hey, if you don't like it, maybe it doesn't work for you, but find a home for it. You might have a buddy that could maybe find value in it. And so just give it to them or trade it for something. That's another great thing about the community is that, I do that every now and then. I'll be like, I'll take to class like a couple of older products, older items, and just say, has anybody got one of these? Yeah, here. There you go.
Cool.
Add that to your collection. Just, I mean, I'm at a point now where I lost a lot of stuff, like the car theft stuff that sucked. And, through some divorce scenarios, I also lost some stuff. So now I'm not holding on to the things that I have or the things that I want to keep. That I still have my original H gear. Like nice. I think I sent a picture. In that well, I sent a picture to Jess of me doing a pose. It was a platoon picture pose, and that got blown up and sent to me. And in that picture, that H gear, I still have that H gear.
Nice.
So that's something awesome. That I have. Yeah, I still have that H gear.
Very cool.
Cool. Yeah.
Awesome, man. Awesome. Well, hey, thank you for spending so much time. All these things we talked about, they'll be in the show notes, Trident Concepts, and where did which site do people go to for the book?
Same. They can go to Trident Concepts and look in the pro shop, or they can go to concealedcarrymanual.com. Okay. Got it.
So all that stuff, we'll put all that stuff in the show notes. But man, it's been so awesome catching up, and I can't believe I didn't know all that stuff about Panama. That's amazing. Yeah. So, incredible.
It's just one of those things too. Still kind of like the silent professional kind of thing. Just never really talked about it. I mean, it's not that I haven't talked about it. I just don't make it a point to just
don't lead with it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You did a good job of extrapolating all of that. Well done.
Nice. No, thank you for sharing it. That's really that period of time is so interesting to me because I wasn't there and experienced it only through news, through magazines, through books. So it's really fascinating. So thank you so much for sharing that, and thank you for
my honor
for all that time in the teams and for passing on those lessons to me as a bud student and what you continue to pass on now to citizens. So thank you.
I love hearing that. Thank you for that. It's always been my honor. I think my time in the Navy is one of my greatest achievements. So very happy about it.
Awesome, man. Awesome. Well, take care, and hopefully I'll see you in person soon.
Absolutely.
All right. Take care, brother.
Adios.
Navy Federal Credit Union wants to thank the men and women in the U.S. military for their important commitment to our country. For more than 90 years, Navy Federal Credit Union has made it their mission to help people in the military community. Navy Federal Credit Union is open to all branches of the military, veterans, and their families. Navy Federal's employees are veterans and military spouses, which makes them a part of the community they serve. They understand their members better than anyone. Members could enjoy earnings and savings of $349 per year, a regular savings rate 4 times higher than the industry average, an average credit card APR that's 5% lower than the industry average, award-winning 24/7 stateside member service, and 0.25% discounted rate on VA loans. Show your support for our troops with the hashtag #MilitaryMissionThanks. And my family thinks about veterans. Those are currently serving our nation each and every day, giving us these options and opportunities in the private sector. So everyone out there who has served and is serving, from the bottom of my heart, thank you. Learn more about how Navy Federal is creating and celebrating the commitment that connects them to their members at NavyFederal.com/celebrate. Navy Federal is insured by NCUA. Dollar value shown represents the results of the 2021 Navy Federal Member Giveback Study. Credit card value claim based on 2021 internal average APR assigned to members compared to advertised industry APR average published on creditcards.com. NFCU reserves the right to change or discontinue promotions and rates at any time without notice. Navy Federal, check them out. Today's episode is also brought to you by Black Rifle Coffee Company. Grab a can of Black Rifle Coffee's ready to drink, the perfect balance of quality and convenience. If you want a Spartan-level caffeine kick, try Ready to Drink 300, available in salted caramel, vanilla bomb, and more. Made with an electrifying blend of MCT oil and amino acids, Ready to Drink 300 packs a caffeine punch that'll supercharge your day. Ready to drink is perfect if you need your coffee quick, and shopping with Black Rifle Coffee helps give back to the veterans and first responders who serve our nation. You can stock up on cans at blackriflecoffee.com or grab an ice cold can at a convenience store near you. You can stock up at blackriflecoffee.com/dangerclose and use code DangerClose20 at checkout for 20% off your purchase and your first coffee club order. blackriflecoffee.com/dangerclose for 20% off. Welcome to the gear highlight portion of the Danger Close podcast. Figured I'd do a little EDC video today because it's been a while and just go through what I happen to have on me for this podcast. First off, Gatorz sunglasses. Rarely am I without my Gatorz sunglasses. I started wearing these in the late 90s. These are a new design. These are the Deltas, and absolutely love these. So Gatorz sunglasses right there. A watch. This one is by Matt Graham at Aries Watches. Matt's been on the podcast before, so you can check that out. Aries watch right there. And let's see. The pistol right here, this is the SIG P365, and I've been carrying this for a long time now. Absolutely love it. And let's see, extra mag over here in this pocket, and holster. Holster is the BlackPoint Tactical Mini Wing, and I love the Mini Wing. Been using this since 2016, and what I like about this is that it has the type of pistol that it's made for written right there on the back. So BlackPoint Tactical Mini Wing right there. Love this holster. And what else here? Blade folder. So this is the half-face blade folder right here. And what I typically use the folder for is opening boxes or whatever else, so that I know if I reach for this, and this is the fixed blade right here, that this one is sharp, because this one is not used for opening boxes or cutting rope or whatever else. And this is the Dynamis Razorback right here. Love this blade, designed by my buddy Dom Rosso and made by Winkler Knives. So that's why I carry the two blades, fixed blade for fighting and the folder for doing the chores and doing everything else. What else do I have on me here? Tourniquet. So this is a SnakeStaff Systems tourniquet, and this is a little smaller, as you can see, than most tourniquets that you're probably used to. And I have those larger tourniquets all over the place, in backpacks, in drawers, in the vehicles. They talk about this one as being akin to a subcompact pistol. And ever since I got this, I've carried it with me everywhere. So check out SnakeStaff Systems, and when you get one, then be sure and test it out. Make sure you can get it on all your limbs. Get some training with it if you don't have training, but I've carried this everywhere with me since I got it. So SnakeStaff Systems tourniquet. And what else? Wallet. So right there, check that out. That is the Cross Tomahawks wallet. You can go to officialjackcarr.com, click on shop in the upper right-hand corner for the merch, and that's where this wallet is. And what else? A phone right there. And let's see, the belt. So the belt is from Dynamis. Oh, the jeans are from Origin USA. So they're the Delta 68s, a little nod to Vietnam era frogmen. But this right here is a belt that I've been wearing since 2016 or 2017. And Dynamis belt, there's a couple little secrets to this thing. There's some coins in here, so you can turn this into a sap if need be. And there are a couple other secrets to this belt as well. You can go to dynamisalliancecrusheverything.com to find out more about this particular belt. And what else? Oh, here's the sheath for the Razorback. And I think that is everything I have on me today. Awesome. Take care out there. Thank you for tuning in to the Danger Close podcast, an Ironclad original presented by Navy Federal Credit Union. My upcoming novel, Only the Dead, hits shelves May 16th as an ebook, audiobook, and in hardcover. It is available for pre-order right now. To find out more about Jeff Gonzales, go to Instagram. He is JL_Gonzales, GONZALES. Also go to his website, TridentConcepts.com. You can find his book there. You can link to all his social channels. And also on Instagram, go to Bulletproof Workshop to find out more about his podcast and type into the search engine Bulletproof Workshop to go to his website and check out what he has going on over there. You can follow me on the social channels at Jack Carr USA, officialjackcarr.com. That is the website. You can go to the upper right-hand corner and click on shop for the merch. And if you enjoyed this conversation, be sure and leave a 5-star rating and review wherever you get your podcasts. Until the next time, take care out there, stay safe, be strong, keep fighting.